Chapter 41-42. Middle Cauldron Mountain was the highest mountain in Middle Island. The distance between the peak and the ground was at least 3,000 meters. Even a profound ascension expert would not be able to withstand falling down like that. Moreover, Southern Aurora was clearly seriously injured by the punch just now. This, the Will of Heaven, was indeed a ruthless character who ran amok in Middle Island back then. A dignified, early-stage, profound ascension expert was easily defeated by a punch. The name of killing someone with a higher cultivation level was indeed well-deserved. While everyone was shocked, Si Haishao, who was originally very close to Southern Aurora, was glanced at by the Will of Heaven from afar. He was so scared that his scalp went numb. He did not dare to stay here any longer and hurriedly led his people down the mountain. Although Southern Aurora was punched down on Middle Cauldron Mountain and was inevitably seriously injured, he might not really die. As long as he could be found in time, there might be a chance of survival. After all, he was an early-stage profound ascension expert. His vitality was much stronger than a cockroach. Among the crowd that followed Si Haishao and left in a hurry, Lin Yi was surprised to find the figure of an old rival. It was Patriarch Xianchen. Although Lin Yi was surprised by this sudden discovery, he was not unprepared. After all, Sydney had previously said that Patriarch Xianchen had been transported to Middle Island with them. Previously, when they were in the secular world, Xianchen had been fawning on Southern Aurora in all sorts of ways. Now that he was in Middle Island, it was not strange at all. Moreover, Xianchen was dressed in the same uniform as the others around him. If he was not mistaken, he should be from the Cultivator College. Looking at Xianchen's back, the corner of Lin Yi's mouth involuntarily curled up. If it were not for the fact that this gathering of big shots was too sensitive, he would definitely make a move to keep him here. However, since he already knew that the other party was from the Cultivator College, it would not be a problem to deal with him next time. Anyway, with Lin Yi's current early-stage golden core strength, Xianchen should no longer be his opponent. The crowd was dead silent for a long time, under everyone's gaze. Only then did the island master of Middle Island announce, helplessly, the Will of Heaven succeeded in his challenge. I hereby announce that from today onwards, the Will of Heaven will return to the position of the Vice Island Master of Middle Island. The crowd instantly burst into an uproar again. Although this was within reason, they had come today with the intention of cheering for Southern Polar Light. They did not expect that in the blink of an eye, the main character would be changed to the Will of Heaven. How could they endure this? However, to be able to become the leader of a faction, one had to be extremely powerful. These people were naturally shrewd and thick-skinned. They immediately suppressed their unnaturalness and surrounded the Will of Heaven to congratulate him. After today's battle, there was no doubt about Tianxing's abilities. As a cultivator at the original completion realm, he was already one of the few who stood at the very top. That, coupled with the fact that he was the Vice Island leader of the Middle Island, meant that no clan dared to provoke him. Even if he couldn't make friends with them, at least he couldn't let the Will of Heaven bear a grudge because of what happened today. Otherwise, they would be inviting a huge disaster for no reason. However, in the face of these big shots' insincere compliments, the Will of Heaven simply couldn't be bothered to respond. He directly strode over to Lin Yi, and the two of them shook hands and chatted happily. Big Brother Heaven, we have to celebrate when we go back today. You killed Southern Polar Light in one move. Regaining the position of the Vice Island Master is a joyous occasion. Lin Yi said with a smile. That goes without saying. Let's go back and drink to our heart's content. However, it's all thanks to you, Brother Lin Yi, that I can be where I am today. Today, I have to properly toast to you. The Will of Heaven said with a hearty laugh. Big Brother Heaven, Your words are too serious. I'm nothing more than a logistical support for you. To be able to do this, your strength is the foundation. To be honest, I was really a little worried just now. Lin Yi said with some lingering fear. He was now only at the early stage of the gold core realm. His eyesight was still not enough to see through such a high-level confrontation. Just now, when the will of heaven was hit head-on by southern polar light, and at first glance, it seemed that he had no power to fight back. His palms were really sweating. Brother, you don't have to be surprised. The overbearing power of our creation battle art is not just for show. Crushing those of the same level or even those of a higher level is a very normal thing. Southern polar light is just a half-baked, profound ascension early stage, so you don't need to pay attention to him at all. When you reach this level, you will know what I mean. The will of heaven explained with a smile. Big Brother Heaven, since you put it like that, I'm really looking forward to it. However, I'm only at the early stage of the gold core realm now. I don't know how long I'll have to wait to reach the full circle of the original soul realm. Lin Yi was both excited and emotional. The higher the realm, the longer the process of training, and the harder it was to break through. It was very normal for people to be stuck at the gold core realm for tens or hundreds of years without any progress, not to mention the original soul realm, which was above that. Others might have to wait for God knows how long, but for you, Brother Lin Yi, I dare to bet that it definitely won't take long. The will of heaven said with a face of certainty, after all the things that had happened before. In his eyes, Lin Yi's degree of insanity was even higher than that of the pill god Zhang Liju. If even a freak like him was stuck at the gold core and original soul realm, the will of heaven would rather cut off his head and kick it like a ball. I hope so. Then thank you for your auspicious words, Big Brother Heaven. Lin Yi laughed out loud, looking at the backs of Lin Yi and the will of heaven leaving. The group of big shots, including the Middle Island Master, all had complicated expressions. Only Chu Wentian, who had done the will of heaven a favor, had a relaxed expression at this moment. In the crowd, the grandfather and grandson duo, Zhang Dongjue and Zheng Tianchu, had even more ugly expressions. They had come today with the intention of watching the will of heaven lose his position as the Vice Island Master, to see him embarrass himself, but they didn't expect such an unexpected turn of events. More importantly, killing Nantian Aurora in one move, such a terrifying and domineering strength, just thinking about it made their hearts heavy. Zheng Dongjue, as the Vice Hall Master of the Dan Hall, couldn't help but tremble in the face of such a monster. I think, let's just forget about the matter with Tianchu. You better not go looking for trouble. This guy, the will of heaven, is an idiot. If you really piss him off, who knows what he will do? When that time comes, even I, your grandfather, can't protect you. Zheng Dongjue sighed helplessly and said faintly he was speaking the truth. Because he hadn't seen the will of heaven's real strength before, he didn't know how much strength he had recovered. So he still had a sliver of hope in his heart. But now, if he still had this kind of fantasy, then he would really be an idiot. Grandson understands. Zheng Tianchu gritted his teeth unwillingly, but no matter how stupid he wasn't that stupid after all. Zheng Dongjue's words were not alarmist talk. After today's battle, the will of heaven had already become the original legendary expert who ran amok in Middle Island, and his reputation was like the sun in the sky again. If he really dared to provoke Tian Chan when he was killed by the will of heaven, no one would speak up for him, and Zheng Dongjue would even have to apologize for him. Floating astronomy. Chapter 41-43. You can't accept it, right? Zheng Dongjue glanced at him and smiled bitterly. I can't accept it either, but there's nothing we can do about it. We have to bow our heads when it's time. But you don't have to be discouraged. As the saying goes, when prosperity reaches its peak, someone will come out to take care of the will of heaven for being so arrogant and overbearing. I'm sure he won't be arrogant for long. When that time comes, you'll be able to follow your heart. Anyway, Tian Chan is our Zheng family's daughter-in-law. No one can take her away from us. Yes, Grandpa, you're the one who sees things clearly. Don't worry, I can endure it. Zheng Tianchu nodded heavily. A few days later, at the Cultivator Academy, after mobilizing all the people in the academy and a group of experts from the Central Chamber of Commerce, Si Haixiao led people to search the vast forest of Middle Cauldron Mountain for 3 days and 3 nights before finally finding Southern Sky Aurora, who had fallen into the quagmire. At this moment, Southern Sky Aurora, the high and mighty early stage profound ascension expert, had already become a drowned rat on his last breath. If they had found him a few days later, he would probably have become a cold corpse, after receiving a fatal punch from Tianxing, and then being thrown from the peak of the Middle Cauldron Mountain, which was more than 3,000 meters high. It was already a miracle that Southern Aurora Polaris was still able to hold on until now. The tenacity of a mysterious ascension expert's life force was indeed extraordinary. But even so, when Southern Sky Aurora was carried back to the Cultivator Academy, he was still like a dead dog, only 1 step away from death. When he heard this news, Patriarch Black Earth, who was searching elsewhere, immediately rushed to Nantian Aurora's cultivation cave abode. The moment he walked in, he started wailing in grief and indignation. His wails were heart-wrenching and heart-wrenching. Extreme grief. "What are you crying for?" Si Haixiao glanced at him, frowned, and scolded, "It's not like he's dead. What are you crying for? This kind of injury is nothing to our Central Chamber of Commerce. We have plenty of spirit jades. No matter how serious the injury is, we can cure it. We can even save the dead. Stop crying for me." His words were like that of a nouveau riche. "That's how rich you are." "Ah, so Dean Nantian is fine?" Patriarch Xianchen was taken aback. She heaved a sigh of relief, and only then did she bitterly stop crying. "Of course it's fine. Otherwise, do you think our Central Chamber of Commerce is useless?" Si Haixiao smiled proudly. Then he sized up the Black Earth Patriarch and asked, "If I remember correctly, the Black Earth Patriarch is the Black Earth Patriarch. You seem to be the follower that old friend Nantian brought here from the secular world. I think he even introduced you to me before." Yes. I didn't expect Manager C to still remember me. I'm truly honored." Patriarch Black Earth nodded repeatedly. When he was in the secular world, he was a high and mighty boss, but when he arrived at the Heavenly Island, he had to change his mindset and behave with his tail between his legs. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to achieve his ambitions. They wouldn't even live long. "Since my old friend Southern Sky thinks so highly of you, then I won't treat you as an outsider. You can stay for a few days. Stay here and serve old friend Nantian," Si Haixiao said lightly. "Thank you, Manager C. I had the same intention." Patriarch Black Earth Patriarch hurriedly agreed. If he was in the secular world, he would definitely slap the other party to death if he, the boss of the 5 Elements sect, was asked to serve someone else. But at this moment, not only was he not worried at all, instead, he was overjoyed. Even if he lost to the will of heaven, Nantian Aurora was still the Cultivator Academy's vice dean. He was still a super expert at the mysterious ascension early stage. To be able to have the opportunity to serve such a great figure, to him, it wasn't a matter of being bullied, but a genuine blessing. This kind of rare opportunity couldn't even be begged for normally. Patriarch Black Earth Patriarch believed that as long as he served Nantian Aurora wholeheartedly, he would definitely value him more after he recovered, and he would definitely benefit from it. As it turned out, Si Haixiao's words weren't empty words. Under the treatment of the Central Chamber of Commerce's sacred healing medicine, the dying Nantion Aurora quickly returned from the gates of hell and regained consciousness. Although his injuries were too severe, and he couldn't fully recover in a short period of time, at least Nantion Aurora finally regained consciousness and could speak. Manager C, I'm really grateful to you this time. If it wasn't for you, I'm afraid I would have. Nantion Aurora expressed his gratitude with a face full of gratitude. We're a family, so there's no need to stand on ceremony. Old friend Nantion, we're on the same side. Saving you is my duty, and it's something I should do. There's no need to be so courteous with me. Si Haishao immediately shook his head and waved his hand. Sigh, it was supposed to be a great thing, but I didn't expect someone like the will of heaven to appear out of nowhere and ruin our great plan. This is intolerable. Nantion Aurora gritted his teeth and said, hatefully, a moment before the challenge from the will of heaven, he was still the glorious Vice Island master of Middle Island. He was riding on the crest of success, but he didn't expect to fall to dust in the blink of an eye. Now, he was probably the laughingstock of the entire Middle Island. I also didn't expect the will of heaven, to be so powerful. Even you, old friend Nantion, aren't his match. Didn't you say that he had just recovered from his heavy injuries? How did he recover his strength so quickly? Si Haishao said with a puzzled expression. I also thought it was inconceivable, so I wasn't mentally prepared at all. That's why I was caught off guard by him. Nantion Aurora found an excuse for himself unwillingly, and then said, compared to this, I'm actually more puzzled about how this guy suddenly recovered. His meridians have been injured for so many years, and rumor has it that even Zhang Liju couldn't heal him. I didn't expect him to recover so suddenly. How strange. Right. I've been puzzled about this too. Even our Central Chamber of Commerce's intelligence department couldn't find out about this. They only found out a rough explanation, saying that he was healed by a foreign medicine master. Si Haishao nodded in agreement. When the news of the will of heaven recovering spread out, it had already caused quite a commotion in Middle Island. Such an important figure like the will of heaven would naturally attract the Central Chamber of Commerce's attention. However, Middle Island's Alchemy Hall was different from ordinary sections. Even they couldn't easily infiltrate it, so they couldn't obtain clear information. Foreign medicine master? The Xianchen elder, who was at the side, froze when he heard this. He suddenly interrupted thoughtfully. If that's the case, I think it's very likely that Linny did it. Didn't he walk together with the will of heaven before? And when he was in the common world, he specialized in repairing meridians. I heard that he's very skilled in medicine. Really? Nantion Aurora and Si Haishao were both shocked. The person who could heal the will of heaven had to be a mysterious expert, so they immediately eliminated Lin Yi as a suspect. But now that they heard the Xianchen elder's words, it seemed that it really was possible. To be continued, are 655. Chapter 41-44. Speaking of which, Lin Yi and the will of heaven seem to have only gotten together recently. The timing is just right. Si Haishao nodded. Then it must be Lin Yi without a doubt. Damn it, why is it this kid again? He's not very strong, but he can ruin our plans time and time again. He's simply taking advantage of us. Nantion Aurora said, angrily, if it wasn't for Lin Yi, then there wouldn't be Tianqing. Without Tianqing, he would have become the Vice Island master of Middle Island that everyone respected. He wouldn't be lying on the bed with a body full of injuries, becoming a joke to the outside world. Dean Nantion, we can't tolerate this. We can't spoil Lin Yi anymore. If he continues to be so unscrupulous, we must find a chance to deal with him. Patriarch Xianchen suggested with a gloomy face. That's right. This kid is too arrogant. See Haishao nodded in agreement. The last time he was beaten like a dog at the North Island's Hong Chamber of Commerce, it was actually related to Lin Yi. He had always held a grudge against him. Humph. Do you think I don't want to kill that kid? However, we can't do it here, openly. The will of heaven is obviously protecting him. If we deal with him like this, it's equivalent to offending that lunatic. The will of heaven, Nantian Aurora said with a frown. The battle at Middle Pinnacle Mountain, and the will of heaven had already left a psychological shadow in his heart. He was only at the perfected nascent soul stage, but it made him, a mysterious ascension early stage expert, feel an insurmountable gap in strength. This kind of gap could not be seen, but he was already in despair. Nantian Aurora was undoubtedly a proud person, but even so, he had completely lost the courage to fight with the will of heaven again. In this lifetime, he probably would not be able to win against the will of heaven again. Hearing this, Si Haishao and Patriarch Xianchen fell silent. Even Nantian Aurora was afraid of the will of heaven. Their strength was far inferior. They dared not provoke him. Why don't we do it after Lin Yi returns to the North Island? No matter how powerful the will of heaven is, he can't possibly follow him to the North Island, right? Patriarch Xianchen suddenly suggested. Si Haishao shook his head and said, "That's even worse. That guy also has a backer in the North Island. Shanghai Tianhua, the master of Sky-Reaching Pavilion, is protecting him." Shangguan Tianhua, just a mere soaring sky pavilion's pavilion master. What's there to be afraid of? Nantian Aurora said disdainfully. With the strength of the will of heaven, there was no doubt that he was already at the top of Nakajima. It was understandable that he was not a match for him, but Nakajima was Nakajima after all. The strength of a top master was not something that a mere Kitajima could compare to. Old friend Nantian, you are gravely mistaken. Si Haishao shook his head. Ah, what do you mean? Nantian Aurora was stunned. Don't think that Shanghai Tianhua is just the pavilion master of Sky-Reaching Pavilion in the North Island, but accurate intelligence shows that as early as 20 years ago, he was already a great perfection, profound ascension master. If we really forced him to make a move, killing us would be a piece of cake, Si Haishao said with a wry smile. What? A mere soaring sky pavilion's pavilion master in the North Island is actually almost as strong as the island master? Nantian Aurora was instantly shocked. Patriarch Xianchen, who was beside him, was also extremely shocked. Old friend Nantian, don't underestimate the strength of those big shots outside of Nakajima. Many of them are unwilling to come to Nakajima. Otherwise, the power structure of Nakajima might not be like this now. Si Haishao reminded him. Shanghai Tianhua rarely makes a move in person. Very few people know of his strength, let alone mention it. If I hadn't been in charge of the intelligence department of the Chamber of Commerce in the North Island recently, I wouldn't have known about these things. This time, Nantian Aurora and Patriarch Xianchen did not know what to say. The terrifying strength of a great perfection, profound ascension master. Even compared to a monster like the Will of Heaven, he was probably stronger and not weaker. Making a move on Lin Yi in his territory was like touching a tiger's, but then we can't touch Nakajima. We can't touch Nakajima either, so we really can't touch that kid Lin Yi? Patriarch Xianchen said with a face full of unwillingness. Actually, it's not that there's no way. Si Haishao's eyes suddenly lit up. We can totally make a move on his way back to Nakajima. He's a disciple of the 3 major pavilions of Nakajima. Don't think that he'll never go back just because he's in Nakajima now. Yes, if Lin Yi keeps staying in Nakajima and doesn't go back, he'll be betraying the 3 major pavilions of Nakajima. There'll be no place for him on Heaven's stage island anymore. Even Shanghai Tianhua can forget about protecting him. So he'll have to go back sooner or later. And the road is the best opportunity. Shopkeeper C, this idea is brilliant. Nantian Aurora and Patriarch Xianchen both agreed. In that case, let's start preparing for this matter as soon as possible. There's only one chance, so we must be well prepared to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Si Haishao nodded, then immediately said, "By the way, old friend Nantian, now that you're awake, it's time to meet the owner of our Central Chamber of Commerce. What do you think?" "Okay, this time your Central Chamber of Commerce invested so much for me, but in the end, you messed it up. To tell you the truth, I'm actually perturbed, and I've long wanted to go and offer a humble apology," Nantian Aurora said with some fear and trepidation. The Central Chamber of Commerce was mysterious and unfathomable. The more he interacted with it, the more apprehensive he was of its power. Now that things had messed up, and he was even heavily injured, once he was judged to have lost his value, Nantian Aurora was very worried that the other party would do something detrimental to him. This was also human nature. "Hey, old friend Nantian, you're thinking too much. Even horses stumble. No matter how well prepared you are, there'll always be accidents. Our owner has already expressed his stance on this matter, and we don't blame you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have given you so many healing panaceas to treat your injuries." Si Haishao comforted him with a smile. That's good. Nantian Aurora heaved a sigh of relief. The next day, Si Haishao brought Nantian Aurora to the Central Chamber of Commerce's Nakajima headquarters. As Nantian Aurora's follower, Patriarch Xianchen was also brought along. When he arrived at the Central Chamber of Commerce, Nantian Aurora was quickly received by Si Haishao's so-called owner. It was the mysterious black-robed man who took him in on Nakajima back then. This person was very strong. Nantian Aurora instantly shuddered. Although he couldn't even see what the other party looked like, Nantian Aurora could be 100% sure that the other party's strength was definitely far above his own, just from the aura emanating from the other party's body. The other party was at least an expert above the profound ascension middle stage. He felt that this person's strength was even vaguely similar to the island master of Nakajima. When this thought popped up, Nantian Aurora was immediately shocked. Looking at the entire Nakajima, there weren't many profound ascension experts to begin with, and those above the profound ascension middle stage were even rarer. Nantian Aurora had also stayed in the Cultivator Academy for so many years, so he basically knew all the important figures there. However, he had no impression of the person in front of him at all. To be continued. Chapter 41-45. Nantian Aurora could not help but be secretly shocked. He had already thought highly of the Central Chamber of Commerce, but he did not expect that he had still underestimated it. A newly established Chamber of Commerce actually had such a terrifying super expert. It was simply shocking. "I am Nantian Aurora. Greetings, Senior." Nantian Aurora originally wanted to put on the airs of a mysterious Ascension early stage expert, but now that he saw this mysterious person, he did not dare to put on airs and immediately greeted him respectfully. Although he could not see the person's face, he thought that since the other party's strength was so high, the other party's age was definitely far above his own. It was not a loss to call him Senior. "I've been paying attention to you for a long time. No need to stand on ceremony. Sit," the mysterious person replied indifferently. Nantian Aurora hurriedly nodded in thanks and sat opposite the mysterious person. Si Haishao sat beside him. As for Patriarch Black Earth, who came with them, he did not have the qualifications to meet the mysterious person and was directly left outside the door. Although the will of heaven interfered in the competition for the position of Deputy Island Master this time and caused me to die prematurely, I still think highly of your strength. So, I'm prepared to personally invite you to join our center. Are you willing?" The mysterious person went straight to the point. "I am indebted to Senior's great kindness. I cannot be more grateful. The reason why I have my current position is inseparable from the Central Chamber of Commerce's strong support. Since Senior has spoken, I should not refuse. However, I am now the Cultivator Academy's Deputy Dean. If I join the Central Chamber of Commerce, I'm afraid it will be difficult to explain to the Academy." Nantion Aurora pretended to smile bitterly. Before coming here, he had already expected the other party to ask this question. So, he had already thought of an excuse in advance. Although he, Nantion Aurora, needed the Central Chamber of Commerce's support, he was not willing to join just like that. This was a completely different concept. Now, they were only in a cooperative relationship, and everyone was equal. However, if he agreed to join the Central Chamber of Commerce, he would become the other party's subordinate in the future. He would definitely be subjected to all sorts of restrictions. Nantion Aurora was still very clear on this point. "That's fine. If you join our center, we will give you a secret identity that will not be made public. Naturally, there will not be any trouble with the Cultivator Academy. As for your position and treatment here in the future, you do not have to worry. You will definitely be satisfied," the mysterious person said indifferently. This time, Southern Polar Light didn't know how to refuse. Seeing Si Haishao repeatedly signaling him with his eyes to agree, he knew that if he continued to refuse, he would lose face. If he really angered this mysterious person, not only would the Central Chamber of Commerce no longer be allies in the future, but they would also become enemies. That would be big trouble. Then, "I will respectfully accept." Nantion Aurora immediately nodded in agreement. He thought to himself that he would only be joining in private anyway, and the outside world did not know of his relationship with the Central Chamber of Commerce. He could also go back on his word and refuse to admit it. "Very good. In that case, eat this pill. In the future, you will be one of us," said the mysterious man as he placed a medicinal pill before Nantion Aurora. He even needed to take medicine. Nantion Aurora's eyelids twitched. This was completely different from what he had expected. Even if he hadn't eaten pork, he would have seen pigs run. The pill in front of him was definitely poison. Once he consumed it, he would never be able to escape the control of this mysterious person in the future. For a moment, Southern Polar Light couldn't help but want to flick his sleeves and leave. At the end of the day, he and the Central Chamber of Commerce were only using each other. He had never thought of becoming a puppet controlled by the Central Chamber of Commerce. However, the powerful aura of the mysterious person in front of him was so oppressive that he didn't dare to move at all. Nantion Aurora even suspected that if he dared to refuse, he probably wouldn't be able to walk out of here today. He didn't dare to leave, and he didn't want to agree. Instantly, Nantion Aurora was in a dilemma. In an instant, sweat poured down his forehead like rain, and his entire back was completely drenched. "What? You're not willing?" The mysterious person's voice had an additional trace of unfriendliness. He didn't release an earth-shattering aura, but it made Nantion Aurora a mysterious Ascension early-stage expert. So scared that he couldn't breathe. "Old friend Nantion, hurry up and eat it. We definitely won't harm you." Seeing this, Si Haishao, who was at the side, hurriedly chimed in. "There will only be returns if you put in the effort. If you want to obtain higher power and status, you naturally have to show your sincerity. Otherwise, how could the Central Chamber of Commerce invest so much in you? Don't you think so?" One was coercion, and the other was enticement. Nantion Aurora had no choice but to agree. Moreover, it was indeed, as Si Haishao had said. During this period of time, he had already witnessed the enormous power of the Central Chamber of Commerce. He was deeply aware of how terrifying and astonishing it was if he could obtain its full support. Regardless of the cost, just the thought of that scene made him excited and fascinated. In the end, Nantion, Aurora gritted his teeth, picked up the pill on the table, and ate it. He had no choice. If he didn't eat it, he wouldn't be able to escape unscathed today. Good. From now on, you're one of us. Don't worry, the Central Chamber of Commerce will never mistreat one of us. The mysterious person smiled in satisfaction. What should this subordinate do next? Senior, please tell me. Nantion Aurora respectfully asked. Nantion Aurora was a sensible person. Since he had already taken the pill, he knew that it was already impossible for him to go back on his word. Instead, he might as well lower his stance and serve this mysterious person well. This way, he would be able to obtain even greater benefits in the future. Since you failed in the competition for the position of Deputy Island Head of Middle Island this time, find another opportunity next time. What you need to do now is to lay low in the Cultivator Academy, gain a firm foothold, and think of a way to fight for the position of Deputy Dean. As for other matters, we'll decide on them after that. The mysterious person instructed, Yes, I'll obey Senior's instructions. Nantion Aurora immediately accepted the order. Since he was unable to compete for the position of Deputy Island Head of Middle Island in the short term, it was not a bad idea to first obtain the position of Deputy Dean of the Cultivator Academy. He believed that with the Central Chamber of Commerce as his backing, this step would definitely be a piece of cake. Coming out of the mysterious person's room, Nantion Aurora felt as if he had just gone through a sauna. His entire body was drenched in cold sweat. He turned his head and looked at the tightly shut door, filled with lingering fear. Luckily, he was sensible enough just now. If he had said anything wrong, he might already be a corpse by now. Since Nantion Aurora's side had been settled, Patriarch Black Earth, who was guarding outside the door, naturally joined the Central Chamber of Commerce. However, he was different from a core figure like Nantion Aurora, who was highly valued. Even if he had taken the pill, he could only be considered an outer member. In the future, he would still be Nantion Aurora's subordinate. In order to celebrate the two of them joining the Central Chamber of Commerce, Si Haishao specially got someone to prepare a private room. A table of good dishes was laid out, and the three of them drank and chatted merrily. To be continued. Chapter 41-46. Shopkeeper C. You are the shopkeeper of the North Island branch, and you are also in charge of the intelligence department. You must be very familiar with the situation on the North Island. I want to ask about someone. Do you have any impression of him? Patriarch Xianchen asked as he poured wine for the two of them. Oh, we are family. Xianchen, just ask. I will tell you everything I know. Si Haishao promised. I have a disciple in the secular world. This time, he was also teleported to Heaven Stage Island with me, but he didn't come to Middle Island. So, I want to ask you if he was teleported to the North Island. His name is Kong Mingming, Patriarch Xianchen probed. Kong Mingming? So, he is your disciple, Xianchen. What a coincidence. To tell you the truth, this kid was recruited by me a while ago. Now, he is also an outer member of our center. If I had known about this, I would have taken good care of him. Si Haishao promised with a smile. He is really on the North Island. That's great. Thank you for your care, Shopkeeper C. Come, let me propose a toast to you on behalf of my disciple. Patriarch Xianchen was overjoyed and quickly toasted Si Haishao. Well said, well said. Old friend Nantion, come with me. Seeing how much the boss values you today, you will definitely have a meteoric rise in the future. At that time, don't forget about your old friend. Si Haishao turned his head and said with a smile, Same to you. We are in the same boat. No one can forget the other." Nantion Aurora laughed, and the three of them immediately drank their wine. Middle Island Snow Sword Faction. More than half a month had passed since the auction in Middle Island. The entire faction was focused on hunting Wufuling Yi, but there was still no news of him. This person seemed to have evaporated into thin air. After so many days, not a single person had seen him, let alone caught him. Although the higher-ups of the Snowsword faction were angry, they could only give up for the time being. As for Wei Shinjin, now he had barely recovered enough to get out of bed and move, but the meridians in his body could not be healed. Naturally, he did not have the strength of the early stage of Goldcore. Now, he was almost no different from an ordinary person. No matter how much attention he had received in the past as a core disciple, he had now become an ordinary person without any strength. The Snowsword School could no longer focus on him. Since he could not heal his injuries, wasting more medicinal ingredients would be pointless. He had already been completely abandoned by the higher-ups of the school. In the room, there was a man and two women with messy clothes. They were none other than Wei Shinjin, Situ Qian, and their maid, Little Qiuhua. Wei Shinjin couldn't accept such a cruel reality. He didn't dare to go out and could only numb himself by having fun day and night. Otherwise, he would definitely be tortured to the point of insanity by the gloating gazes of his fellow disciples. However, even on the bed, because of his injuries, it was very difficult for him to find his masculinity. He was no longer the same as before. Why is it so short this time? He hasn't had enough yet. Useless. Situ Qian got up from the bed in disgust and said unhappily. The maidservant, Little Qiuhua, also had a bitter expression on her face. Back then, when she had just gotten married, Little Qiuhua had a bitter expression on her face. When Wei Shinjin was a vigorous dragon and fierce tiger, he was more than enough to serve the two of them. But now, he couldn't even satisfy Situ Qian. It was just the beginning, and it was already impossible for her, the little maid, to satisfy him. These days, she was simply suffocated. Being looked at by the two women with such disgust, Wei Shinjin couldn't help but feel depressed. His meridians were damaged, which naturally affected him in this aspect. Moreover, he had not yet recovered, and his body was not even as good as an ordinary person. Situ Qian and Little Qiuhua were very demanding in this aspect. He simply couldn't do anything about it. Looking at Wei Shinjin's cowardly appearance, the disgust in Situ Qian's eyes became even more intense. When Wei Shinjin was injured, she didn't think too much about it. Not only was she busy taking care of him every day, but she was also responsible for comforting him. She could be considered to be doing her best. But now, as time passed, she began to gradually become impatient. She was originally a slut. She had admired Wei Shinjin's strength, so she tried every means possible to be with him. But now, Wei Shinjin had been abandoned by the sex higher-ups and had become a complete cripple. There was no hope of him recovering. The little bit of admiration in Situ Qian's heart had long disappeared, replaced by a stronger and stronger disgust. Forget it, I'm going to cultivate. Situ Qian couldn't be bothered with this trash anymore. She gave Little Qiuhua a look, and the master and maid put on their clothes. Immediately, they swayed their waists and pushed the door open. Cultivate. Wei Shinjin couldn't help but be stunned. In his impression, Situ Qian had never been such a motivated person. It was rare for her to take the initiative to cultivate. Today, the sun rose from the west. The room suddenly became empty, leaving Wei Shinjin alone and sad. He stared at the yellow autumn scenery outside the window, lost in thought. The will of heaven had recovered his strength and became the deputy island owner of Middle Island. The business in Tiandan Pavilion had also been on the right track. Tian Chan and Sydney both had a foothold. For Lin E, the matters in Middle Island were basically almost settled. Counting the days, it had been a month. This unexpected trip to Middle Island should be over. Otherwise, if it continued to drag on here, Lin E couldn't guarantee what would happen in North Island. However, before leaving, Lin E began to refine elixirs with all his strength. He wanted to reserve more elixirs for Tiandan Pavilion, although Tian Chan's strength had skyrocketed and her efficiency in refining elixirs had greatly improved. It seemed that she could support the daily turnover of Tiandan Pavilion. However, the business of Tiandan Pavilion was still growing. If it continued to develop like this, it wouldn't take long for it to exceed the ability of Tian Chan. Lin Yi had to prepare early. Of course, he could continue to refine elixirs after he went back. At that time, he could ask Hong Zhong to help him regularly. However, in addition to the business of Tiandan Pavilion, what Lin Yi couldn't let go of the most was Tian Chan and Sydney. Although the strength of the two women had now reached the early stage of gold core, and they had the protection of powerful figures such as the Will of Heaven, there was no need to worry too much about their safety. However, Lin Yi was still reluctant to separate from the two women. It was not easy for them to reunite in this Middle Island. Now, they had to separate again. No matter who it was, they would be reluctant, especially when the two women were beautiful confidantes. After all, Lin Yi was not an eminent monk who had no worldly desires. It would be a lie to say that he was not moved at all to stay with such two stunning beauties every day. Floating astronomy. Chapter 41-47. During this period of time, Lin Yi's heart had been moved many times, and Tian Chan and Sydney had long since prepared to marry him, but at the last moment, Lin Yi would always stop in time. It wasn't that he had any psychological barriers, and it wasn't because he had any problems in that area that he couldn't talk about. The reason why he was able to control himself was because of that one time when he was drunk, the ghost suddenly appeared and said something. The creation battle art is a traditional morality heart technique. At least before the mysterious ascension stage, you must not touch women. Otherwise, it will cause the flow of true qi in your meridians to reverse. Every time you do it, it will accelerate the flow of true qi in your meridians. When you do it too many times, you will definitely die from the reverse flow of true qi in your meridians. It's that scary? Linny was shocked. Think about it. If you cultivate the mental cultivation method backwards, what will happen to you? I'm not trying to scare you. There's a precedent of this on Sky-class Island before. The ghost laughed. All right. Only then did Lin Yi suppress the fire in his heart. He thought that the art of dragon mastery was a universal practitioner's art, and this Heaven's Fortune battle art that he'd modified, he probably wouldn't die even if he practiced it backwards, right? Of course, this was just a thought. Lin Yi wasn't that bored to the point where he'd go against the flow. After all, this wasn't a joke. If he guessed wrongly, the consequences would be that he'd go mad, or he'd die on the spot. It was because of this episode that Lin Yi was able to control himself and didn't eat the two girls, leaving it for the future. Other than Tian Chan and Sydney, Lin Yi had another unfulfilled wish, and that was the cheap master that he had never met, the pill god Zhang Liju. Lin Yi thought that he would be able to meet Zhang Liju sooner or later, but he didn't expect that this cheap master of his never showed up at all. He didn't even know where Zhang Liju went, let alone meet him. In this period of time, Lin Yi had asked Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, his two disciples, to try and contact Zhang Liju, but there was no reply. Left without a choice, Lin Yi could only start preparing to return to the North Island. As for meeting Zhang Liju, that would have to wait for another day. While preparing to deal with the aftermath before leaving, Lin Yi couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Recalling the original intention of this trip, he suddenly felt a sense of impermanence. Originally, he was just going to Hootsai Mountain to look for the life mushroom, but he didn't expect to be injured by the Golden Core Middle Phase Master, and then brought to Middle Island by Situ Chien. After that, a series of unexpected events happened. The saying that fate played tricks on people was indeed true. Thinking about Situ Chien, Lin Yi couldn't help but hesitate. This woman was the source of Sydney's misery for half a year. Just like Wei Shinjin, he had long since made up his mind to get rid of her. However, now that he had crippled Wei Shinjin, this woman was the only one left. She was no longer a threat to Sydney. After all, she had the protection of the great God, the will of heaven. Even if Sydney's identity was exposed, he believed that the Snow Sword faction wouldn't dare do anything to Sydney. However, leaving this woman alive was still a hidden danger. Lin Yi was now wondering if he could get rid of this danger completely before he left. Although there was a lot of risk in killing Situ Chien, it was the same as dealing with Wei Shinjin. He could use Wufu Lingyi's identity as a scapegoat. This way, it wouldn't affect Tiandan Pavilion. Of course, no matter what, the Snow Sword faction was one of the few big factions on Middle Island. Even if Lin Yi was an early-stage gold core expert, and even had the terrifying potential to become the strongest gold core expert, it was still too arrogant for him to kill Situ Chien. Especially during this period of time, the Snow Sword faction was still searching for Wufu Ling Yi. If he wanted to make a move, he would have to find an excellent opportunity. While Lin Yi was assessing the risk, the whereabouts of Situ Chien, who was his target, became more and more strange in the past few days. It even aroused the suspicion of Wei Shinjin. Before this, Situ Chien and her maid, Little Chihua, would often stay in the room to accompany him. However, in the past few days, the master and maid stayed in the room less and less. They never said anything when they went out. However, every time they came back, Wei Shinjin would find that the two of them had a rosy complexion and were in high spirits. They were like fresh flowers that had been moisturized. As for their sexual affairs, they never mentioned it again after the last time. This made Wei Shinjin very surprised. Whether it was Situ Chien or Little Chihua, they were both women with extremely strong sexual needs. A few days ago, they had been complaining about this matter, but now they simply did not mention it at all. No matter how he thought about it, he felt that there must be something fishy about it. Wei Shinjin could not help but ask about their whereabouts several times. However, the answer he got from Situ Chien was that they had gone to cultivate. This answer was something that Wei Shinjin did not believe at all. According to Situ Chien's usual temperament, it was already the sun rising from the west if she occasionally took the initiative to cultivate. It was simply impossible for her to cultivate for several days in a row. However, Situ Chien did not want to talk about it. It was futile for Wei Shinjin to ask any more questions. He could only continue to suppress his doubts in the bottom of his heart. On this day, just like the previous few days, Situ Chien and her maid Little Chihua went out early, leaving Wei Shinjin to rest alone in his room. It was not until late at night that the sound of their footsteps could be heard from outside the door. "Miss, Senior Brother Ma is really brave today. The Central Chamber of Commerce's medicine is really overbearing. He has been serving us sisters for several hours in a row, but he is still so brave. He. This was the voice of the maid, Little Chihua. Her voice was obviously a bit louder than usual. Moreover, she sounded a bit drunk. It seemed like she had drunk a lot of alcohol. Yes, today was really too exciting. That Wei Shinjin is getting worse and worse. He shouldn't have killed all those male pets. It's such a pity to keep a few of them alive. Now, we can only look for Senior Brother Ma to satisfy our cravings," Situ Chien said with a drunken smile. "That's true. Senior Brother Ma is really brave. and we are also very satisfied with him. However, his appearance is too ordinary. It's a bit disgusting to look at him from the front. He is not as pleasing to the eyes as those male pets of ours. Little Chihuahua also said, regretfully, hearing the words that came from outside the door. Wei Shenjin was so angry that his eyes almost popped out of his eye sockets. He was so angry that he could not wait to take out his sword and cut this B*TCH in half. He had long suspected that there was something going on between the two women. Previously, he thought that the two women were just comforting each other. Although it was a bit embarrassing, his body was weak, so he could only turn a blind eye to it. However, he did not expect that the two women had actually gone to find a wild man and made him wear a big green hat. R1152. Chapter 41-48. Especially when this person was Senior Brother Ma. One had to know that this person had once been disfigured and was one of the ugliest people in the entire Snow Sword faction. Yet, these two women had actually gone to look for him. They were King Shameless. What made Wei Shenjin even more angry and surprised was that these two women actually had a male pet in the past. Wasn't it their first time? And they had indeed witnessed their wedding night. How could they have a male pet? For any healthy man, the most intolerable thing was that his woman had cheated on him. He could wear any hat, but he could not be cuckolded. Suddenly hearing the truth from the two women, Wei Shenjin felt like he had been struck by a bolt from the blue. He could not care less about his weak and unhealed body. His first reaction was to raise his sword and kill them. However, as soon as he reached the door, he heard the approaching footsteps of the two women and their shameless laughter. He felt the ice-cold sensation from the snow sword in his hand. Wei Shenjin, who had flown into a rage out of humiliation, suddenly became a little more clear-headed. He was now a powerless cripple, not a highly regarded core disciple. Not to mention the fact that he could not defeat Sidu Qian. Just the fact that Sidu Qian was the granddaughter of an elder was enough to suppress him to the point that he did not dare to move. If he could, he would definitely rush out and hack these two women to death. However, all of this was just wishful thinking. He had to force himself to calm down and not make a move for the time being. Although the words he had heard just now were enough to let him know the truth, it could not be considered as irrefutable evidence. With his current situation, if he wanted to clean up the Snow Sword faction, he had to first obtain irrefutable evidence. At the very least, he had to make Sidu Qian, the bitch, unable to defend herself. Wei Shenjin suppressed his anger and immediately turned back to the bed, pretending to be asleep. When Sidu Qian and little Chihuahua opened the door reeking of alcohol, he pretended to have just woken up. "Junior sister, you are back. You must be tired from today's training. Come, sit down and rest for a while. Senior brother will get you some hot water to take a bath." Wei Shenjin suppressed the disgust in his heart and forced a smile. Sidu Qian and little Chihuahua couldn't help but look at each other in surprise. Fetching water was usually done by the servants. Even if Wei Shenjin bathed himself, he would never fetch water himself. Even after he was injured and became a cripple, this had never changed. Today was the first time Wei Shenjin did something like this. "All right then, don't be too hot. I like warm water." Sidu Qian nodded. She had thought that Wei Shenjin had finally come to terms with reality. His attitude had changed from a superior core disciple to a useless person, a cripple with no strength and no status. What else could he do other than serving others? Looking at Wei Shenjin busily fetching water for her, Sidu Qian could not help but raise her eyebrows. Recently, she had been in cahoots with Senior Brother Ma. Wei Shenjin, her useless husband, had become an absolute burden in her eyes. Not only was he useless, but he was also a hindrance. She had even begun to ponder about it. Do I need to do something? I might as well just kill Wei Shinjin. Anyway, the sect had already given up on him. She could just find an excuse of a relapse of his injury, and no one would come to investigate. At that time, she would no longer have to worry about this trash, and would be able to fool around with senior brother Ma. However, seeing that Wei Shinjin was so sensible, Situ Qian's killing intent disappeared a little. The killing intent in Situ Qian's heart dissipated a little. If this guy could see the truth and change his attitude, it would not be impossible for her to keep him. After all, she could just order him around as a servant, and it would not be a problem. After a while, Wei Shinjin had fetched the water and deliberately adjusted the temperature to Situ Qian's favorite temperature. Not only that, he even lowered his status and personally helped Situ Qian bathe, massaging her shoulders and scrubbing her back. Situ Qian was overjoyed. And not bad. You did well today. I will reward you tonight. Situ Qian nodded with satisfaction. She had the attitude of a superior queen. It seemed that letting Wei Shinjin sleep with her once was already a great grace. Good, good. Although Wei Shinjin felt as disgusted as if he had swallowed a fly, he still pretended to be overjoyed. Before he obtained conclusive evidence, he could not let this bitch have the slightest doubt. This time, because Wei Shinjin's heart was filled with disgust, he did not feel happy at all. However, this caused the time to be significantly longer than before, which greatly surprised Situ Qian. Even her maid, little Qiuhua, was able to benefit from it. During the day, they fooled around with senior brother Ma, and at night, when they came back, Wei Shinjin worked so hard. Situ Qian and little Qiuhua felt like they had returned to the past. But at that time, they had kept several male pets, which was why they were so satisfied. Not bad, not bad. Wei Shinjin, this cripple, still had some use. He could do the work of a servant, and he could also be ordered around as a male pet. It was good to keep him like this. Feeling satisfied, Situ Qian showed a rare act of kindness and fell into a deep sleep with little Qiuhua, their clothes disheveled and their limbs tangled together. Listening to the breathing of the two women gradually become stable, and after confirming that they were completely asleep, Wei Shinjin cursed the two bitches in his heart. He then gritted his teeth and tiptoed out of the bed. Pulling open the screen, Wei Shinjin walked into a compartment next to it. This was the room that Situ Qian used to freshen up and put on makeup. It was also her most private place. If it was before, Wei Shinjin would not even bother to look at it, let alone deliberately walk in. But now he had to look carefully. Maybe there was something hidden in it. At a glance, the dressing table and the cabinet were filled with women's rouge and face powder. At first glance, there was nothing special about it. However, the paper could not cover the fire. Wei Shinjin only casually flipped through it a few times, and what he saw next completely shocked him. As far as the eye could see, it was filled with filthy things. There were enough of them to fill a large box, and all of them were filthy things used to increase sexual pleasure. If it was before he was injured, Situ Qian would still be careful. These things would definitely be well hidden, and he would not be able to find them so easily. But these days, Situ Qian had obviously begun to not put him, her real husband, in her eyes. Naturally, she was not so vigilant in this aspect. Looking at the things in front of him, Wei Shinjin suddenly clenched his teeth in anger. His body trembled, and he could not help but curse, "Bitch." He really did not expect that Situ Qian, the granddaughter of a dignified elder of the Snowsword faction, would be such a shameless thing. Looking at the logo, Wei Shinjin could not help but be stunned. They were all the logos of the Central Chamber of Commerce. In addition to the pile of props, there were also many drugs for men and women. Floating astronomy. Chapter 4149. Wei Shenjin was so angry that his head was buzzing. However, before he could explode, an exquisite box caught his attention. Artificial membrane. Wei Shenjin did not understand. He read the description carefully and finally understood. Blood rushed to his head, and he almost fainted on the spot. The 2 artificial membranes had already been used. All that was left were the 2 outer wrappers. He finally understood everything. Bitch, bitch, bitch. If I don't kill you, Wei Shenjin, am not a human. Wei Shenjin's eyes were spitting fire. He turned around and walked towards the 2 women who were sleeping soundly on the bed with his snow sword in hand. He had completely lost all sense of reason. In any case, he was already a cripple with no hope of recovery. If he continued to wear this big green hat, then what was the point of him living? In Wei Shenjin's mind, all the hatred he had for Ling Yi had been transferred to Situ Qian and her servant. From what he could see, what happened between Sydney and Ling Yi was a trap set up by Situ Qian. She had purposely framed Sydney and Ling Yi so that he would take the bait and marry her. This woman was too cunning. That was the truth. Wei Shenjin was not stupid. Now that he thought about it, there was something fishy about what had happened. Now, he had finally found the real answer. Situ Qian, you must die today. Carrying his snow sword, Wei Shenjin walked to the bed. His face was filled with murderous intent. He knew that if he were to kill her tonight, he would not be able to escape death. However, he could not care less. Even if he were to die, he would make these 2 bitches his scapegoats and cut them into 1,000 pieces. However, just as Wei Shenjin was about to kill her, Situ Qian, who was lying on the bed in a disheveled state, seemed to have sensed something. She turned around in a daze. What are you doing up in the middle of the night? Situ Qian opened her sleepy eyes and mumbled to Wei Shenjin, who was standing in front of the bed. Wei Shenjin was startled. Only then did he remember that his opponent was not a cripple like him, but a Consummation Foundation establishment expert. His perception was very sharp. Furthermore, his snow sword was forged from 1,000-year-old frost iron. Even if he did not use the Snow Sword School's core martial techniques and just drew the sword from the scabbard, he would not be able to sense anything. That would also cause the surrounding temperature to plummet, which was why Situ Qian had woken up. Fortunately, Situ Qian had drunk too much and had been fooling around for days and nights. Although she was subconsciously awakened by the cold air, she was not fully awake yet. She could only mutter in a daze. Even if Wei Shenjin wanted to perish together with Situ Qian, Wei Shenjin knew that he could not kill her now that she had woken up. He could only temporarily find an excuse to fool them and wait for the next opportunity. Oh, it's nothing. Wei Shenjin hurriedly put Snow Sword to the side, without batting an eyelid, pretending to be impatient. He swallowed his saliva and said to Situ Qian, you're too beautiful, so I want to do it again. I don't think I gave you any medicine. Why are you so fierce today? You've improved a lot. Come on, I'll make an exception and reward you again. Situ Qian's attention was indeed diverted. She immediately twisted her body and urged Wei Shenjin to hurry up. She had always been open to such things. Wei Shenjin was relieved and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He hurriedly rushed up, but his eyes were cold and gloomy. In the Cultivators' College, Nantian Aurora, Si Haishao, and Ancestor Xianqin gathered together to discuss how to deal with Lin Yi. Although they had already made up their minds to take action on Lin Yi's way back to the North Island, it was the best opportunity for them. However, there was still a lot of risk. With their strength, killing Lin Yi would not be a problem. The real problem was what would happen next. What they had to worry about was whether Lin Yi's death would anger the will of heaven and Shanghai Tianhua in the North Island. One of them was in the Middle Island, and the other was in the North Island. Once the news got out, it would be easy for anyone to kill them, unless they hid in the Central Chamber of Commerce and never came out to do business. In that case, the mysterious man could save their lives. Killing Lin Yi isn't difficult at all. The difficult part is how to ensure that we don't get involved and leave no clues. That's the key. Si Haixiao pinched his chin and frowned. Indeed, that old thing Tianqing is too ferocious. If he were to find out that we killed Lin Yi with his lawless nature as a madman, he might just kill everyone in the Cultivator Academy. With that explosive power of his, apart from the dean, no one would be able to stop him. Nantia and Aurora nodded with lingering fear. If we all cover our faces and are a little more careful, there shouldn't be any clues left, right? Even if he's powerful, he's not a god. He can't be omniscient and omnipotent, right? Ancestor Xianqin could not help but say, in his opinion, Nantian Aurora and Si Haixiao were a little too careful in this matter. The higher one's status was, the more timid they were. As long as they masked their faces and made a move, how would the will of heaven know that they were the ones who did it? The will of heaven is indeed not a god, and he's not omniscient and omnipotent, but with his level and ability, it's a piece of cake for him to find out anything. Xianqin, have you forgotten the identity of the will of heaven? Nantian Aurora glanced at him and said, Identity. Ancestor Xianqin was stunned. He had never heard anyone mention it before. That's right. Don't forget that the will of heaven is the deputy island master of Middle Island. He only needs to let the Middle Island Law Enforcement Hall take action, and it'll be very easy to get to the bottom of this. After all, we're not experts in this area. We mustn't let our guard down. Nantian Aurora echoed with a bitter smile. In that case, as long as we make a move, won't he find out? Ancestor Xianqin said, helplessly. That seems to be the case. If we want to kill Lin Yi without taking any risks, it seems unlikely. Nantian Aurora and Si Haixiao both sighed. If they could afford to offend the will of heaven, they would have directly made a move against the will of heaven. Why would they still turn their attention to Lin Yi? But as they discussed, they suddenly realized that it was becoming more and more difficult to deal with a mere Lin Yi. How could they endure this? However, if they were asked to stop just like that, they would definitely not be willing. After all, they were also important figures with status. If they didn't even dare to kill a mere Lin Yi, then what were they supposed to do? Floating astronomy. Chapter 4150. Just as Nantian Aurora and Si Haixiao were about to make up their minds to kill Lin Yi, even at the risk of the will of heaven's revenge, Patriarch Xianqin suddenly made a suggestion, causing their eyes to light up. What if we don't do it ourselves, but use someone else to kill Lin Yi? Patriarch Xianqin asked. He was an extremely malicious person. If he wanted to play dirty, he would be able to compete with Kong Mingming. Otherwise, they wouldn't have become master and disciple. Use someone else to kill? That's a good idea. Nantian Aurora's eyes immediately lit up. He turned to Si Haixiao and said, Shopkeeper Si, didn't you say you're in charge of the intelligence system? See, if there's anyone we can make use of. I'm only in charge of the North Island's intelligence system. I haven't interfered with Middle Island's side yet. I've only roughly seen some information. Si Haixiao smiled, and then said, but speaking of making use of someone other than the will of heaven, the biggest news in Middle Island recently is that Snowsword Faction's core disciple being beaten into a cripple. Snowsword Faction is in a hurry to take revenge. Can we think of a way to pin the blame on Lin Yi? Oh, what's going on? Quickly tell us, Nantian Aurora hurriedly asked. Previously, He was only concerned about fighting for the position of Middle Island's Vice Island Lord and didn't have the time to care about gossip. As for Patriarch Xianchen, he happened to be in seclusion a while ago. He only came out on the day Nantian Aurora took over. After that, a series of events happened, so he didn't have the chance to listen to the news. Snow Sword Faction's core disciple, Wei Shenjin, had his meridians shattered by someone and became a cripple. The person who injured him was a martial artist called Ling Yi. No one knows where this person came from. Before that, he had already caused a commotion. It was said that this martial artist Ling Yi had an affair with the Snow Sword Faction's maidservant, Sydney, and had eloped. The entire city was in an uproar. Because of this, the Snow Sword Faction has already put him on the wanted list twice. Now, he has already become a moderately famous person in Middle Island. Si Haixiao explained to the two. I see. Only then did Nantian Aurora nod. However, he immediately frowned and said, "But what does this have to do with Lin Yi? The Snow Sword Faction is looking for Wufu Ling Yi. We can't just push this matter onto Lin Yi just because the name sounds similar. The Snow Sword Faction is not stupid. How can they be used so easily?" That's true, but apart from this, there doesn't seem to be anything else that can be used. Si Haixiao was halfway through his sentence when the Black Earth Patriarch suddenly slapped his thigh. His eyes lit up as he shouted, "Oh, F***CK, this is a heavenly opportunity." "Oh, what do you mean?" Southern Polar Light and Si Haixiao were both stunned. The martial artist that Manager C mentioned earlier is called Ling Yi, right? Do you know what happened to Lin Yi when he was in the secular world? What's your favorite alias? Patriarch Xianchen asked excitedly. Could it be Ling Yi? Si Haixiao was shocked when he heard that. He suddenly remembered that Lin Yi had a precedent of hiding his identity in the North Island. However, at that time, his alias was Lin Air. Now that he was in the Middle Island, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't use the same trick again. That's right, it's Ling Yi. Patriarch Xianchen nodded heavily. There's such a thing. Southern Polar Light's eyes lit up, but then he said, "But how can we prove that Lin Yi is Ling Yi? Even if he used this alias in the secular world before, we can say that it was just a coincidence. Just based on this point, if we want to convince the Snow Sword Faction to be our fighter, that's not enough." Actually, there's no need to prove it. If it were someone else, there might really be a possibility of having the same name. However, I know that's Sydney. She's Lin Yi's mistress in the secular world. Patriarch Xianchen said with certainty, "Dean Nantian, did you forget that when the Heavenly Stage Island opened in the secular world, in the harem of Lin Yi's women, Sydney was included?" That's right. Only then did Southern Polar Light come to a sudden realization. With his status, he wouldn't pay attention to such a small matter. However, with Patriarch Xianchen's reminder, he remembered. Although his memory was a little fuzzy, it seemed that there really was such a thing. In that case, that Ling Yi is definitely Lin Yi in disguise. Si Haixiao asked hurriedly. There's absolutely no mistake. Wufu Ling Yi and Lin Yi are 100% the same person. I can guarantee this with my head. Patriarch Xianchen swore solemnly. Wonderful. This is wonderful. In that case, the Snow Sword Faction has no choice but to be this free fighter. Let's go. Let's go to the Snow Sword Faction now. Southern Polar Light immediately made the decision excitedly. Once this scheme succeeded, even if the will of heaven pursued the matter in the future, the hatred would only fall on the Snow Sword Faction, and the three of them wouldn't need to bear the slightest risk. It was simply wonderful. Southern Polar Light immediately brought Si Haixiao and Patriarch Xianchen to the Snow Sword Faction. With his status and position as the Cultivator Academy's vice dean, The higher-ups of the Snow Sword faction had already come out to welcome them before they even entered. Even though he had lost the competition for the position of Middle Island's Vice Island Master and was beaten black and blue by the will of heaven, he, Southern Polar Light, was still one of the few Profound Ascension initial stage experts of Middle Island. Furthermore, he had a wide network. No matter which faction he went to, he would be a highly sought-after guest. It's been a few days. How have you been, Elder Situ? Southern Polar Light greeted with a smile. Coincidentally, the Snow Sword faction's higher-up elder, who came out to welcome them, this time was Situ Qian's grandfather, Situ Guangzong. Dean Southern Polar Light is an esteemed guest that we can't even invite. You've really brought light to our humble Snow Sword faction by coming from afar. Please come in. Situ Guangzong cupped his hands in greeting with a smile. However, Situ Guangzong couldn't help but feel bewildered. He had personally witnessed Southern Polar Light being knocked off the Middle Cauldron Mountain by the will of heaven. Like most people, Situ Guangzong had originally thought that even if Southern Polar Light didn't die, he would become a cripple. He didn't expect that in just a few days he would recover to such high spirits. How strange! It must be known that the effects of a top-grade, fourth-grade great returning pill were no longer that obvious for Profound Ascension experts. As they chatted and joked, Southern Polar Light and the other two were invited to the main seats in the living room. Situ Guangzong had even specially ordered people to prepare top-grade spirit tea and entertain them attentively. One doesn't visit for no reason. I've come to your esteemed sect this time because I have an important piece of news that I believe needs to be reported to your esteemed sect. Southern Polar Light went straight to the point. Important news? Situ Guangzong was slightly taken aback. Then he said, "Please speak, Dean Southern Polar Light. I'm all ears." Chapter 4151. That's right. This is indeed the case. That Wei Shinjin is not an outsider. He is my grandson-in-law. Originally, he was a seedling with boundless prospects. Who would have thought that something like this would happen? Sigh. Situ Guangzong sighed. He had originally thought highly of Wei Shinjin and had been trying to matchmake Situ Qian and Wei Shinjin. Unexpectedly, they had only been married for a few days before he was beaten into a cripple. He had gone from a potential stock to a trash stock. How could he endure this? Elder Situ, why don't you call him over to see me? I believe he has been waiting for this news for a long time. Nantian Aurora pretended to be profound and kept them in suspense. Could it be? Situ Guangzong's eyes immediately lit up. He had already guessed the reason. He immediately agreed. All right. Dean Nantian, please wait for a moment. This old man will get someone to call him over. Oh, right. Invite Elder Wei Feng as well. He is also from the Wei clan and has some blood ties with Wei Shinjin. He has always been very concerned about this matter. That's even better. Elder Situ, feel free to invite him over. Nantian Aurora, Si Haishao, and the others nodded in agreement. They had come this time to get someone else to do their dirty work. Of course, the more the merrier. Having an elder class expert was something they could not ask for more. It would be best if the entire Snow Sword School turned out in full force. Situ Guangzong immediately gave an order to the Snow Sword School, disciples guarding the door, telling them to split up and call someone over. Meanwhile, he continued chatting and laughing with Nantian Aurora and the others. After a while, Wei Feng led the way in. He was a middle-aged man with a dignified appearance. His strength could be considered a first-rate existence in the Snow Sword School. Behind him were Wei Shinjin and Situ Qian. Situ Guangzong introduced them. After exchanging some pleasantries, they got to the main topic. Nantian Aurora cleared his throat and said, "I won't hide it from you all. The news I have brought this time is regarding that Wu Fu Ling Yi who has been wanted by the entire city all this time, but there has been no news of him. Wu Fu Ling Yi. When the others heard this, they were immediately startled. Even if Situ Guangzong had guessed this beforehand, they would not be able to do so. As for Wei Feng, his expression abruptly changed. Wei Xinjin was a disciple that he had personally nurtured and nurtured. Now, his many years of painstaking effort had been destroyed in a single day. His hatred for that Wu Fu Ling Yi was no less than anyone else's. Among the people present, Wei Xinjin was not as shocked as he was when he heard the news. His hatred was now completely transferred to Situ Qian, the B**TCH, even though the one who injured him was Wu Fu Ling. However, strictly speaking, both of them were just pawns that had been provoked by someone else. Situ Qian, the slut, was the one who deserved to be sliced into pieces. As for Situ Qian, she did not care about this at all. All she wanted to do now was to find a wild man to have sex with. It would be best if he was taller than Senior Brother Ma and had a decent appearance. Where is he? Has he already escaped to the outer islands? Situ Guangzong asked on behalf of everyone. No, he is currently on the Middle Island. Furthermore, he is living a grand life. Nantian Aurora shook his head indifferently. How is that possible? Situ Guangzong and the others exchanged glances. The Snow Sword faction had put out a bounty for Wu Fu Ling Yi. Even though they had withdrawn quite a number of people over the past few days, they had not stopped the bounty for the entire city. If Wu Fu Ling Yi was still on the Middle Island, how could he be living a grand life without them knowing? The bounty offered by their Snow Sword faction was not low at all. That's the truth. The reason why he could hide from the eyes and ears of your esteemed sect is actually very simple. He has simply changed his appearance. Nantian Aurora curled his lips and smiled. Dean Nantian, do you mean that Wu Fu Ling Yi is currently wearing a human skin mask and has changed his appearance? Situ Guangzong and the others exchanged glances. Such a thing was actually not new. There had been people from the Snow Sword faction who had made such a conjecture before. However, even so, they did not know what the other party had changed into, so they had no way of dealing with it. On the contrary, Wu Fu Ling Yi is merely a human skin mask. This is his original appearance. As for his current identity, I'm sure everyone has heard of it. Elder Situ might have even seen him face to face on that day, at the Island Lord Pavilion on the Middle Cauldron Mountain. He is the brother-in-law of the Will of Heaven, as well as the owner of the Tiandan Pavilion, Lin Yi. Nantian Aurora finally revealed the truth. That Lin Yi is Wu Fu Ling Yi. Situ Guangzong, and the others were instantly shocked. The Will of Heaven and the Tiandan Pavilion had two great influences. Currently, Lin Yi's name had gradually entered the sights of the mainstream circles of the Middle Island. There were quite a few people who had heard of his name. Do you have any proof, Dean Nantian? Wei Feng asked in a deep voice. He was not familiar with Nantian Aurora, so he could not help but be suspicious when he suddenly heard such a thing. After all, if Lin Yi and Wu Fu Ling Yi were really the same person, then the things he had done before were somewhat unimaginable. For example, eloping with Sydney. If Wu Fu Ling Yi had the powerful backing of the Will of Heaven, he could take Sydney away with just a word. The Snow Sword faction would not reject him for a mere maidservant. Why would he need to change his appearance and secretly elope? Of course we do. Why would we use such a thing to deceive your faction? What good would that do us? Nantian Aurora, Si Haishao, and the others looked at each other. Then they told them the whole story of Lin Yi, including the proof that Lin Yi was Wu Fu Ling Yi. From the secular world, he had killed his way up to the Heaven Stage Island In less than a year, he had befriended a super expert like the Will of Heaven. Now, he had even opened the Tiandan Pavilion and become the owner of a rich family. Lin Yi's legendary experience had truly left everyone dumbfounded. In particular, Situ Qian's eyes were shining. If she had known that this guy was so powerful, she would not have let him meet Sydney. She would have kept him for her own use. Not only did he have such powerful strength and background, he also had so many female confidants. His ability in that aspect was definitely heaven-defying. He was practically a golden tortoise that was hard to find in this world. Sigh, what a pity! As Situ Qian regretted her actions, she fantasized about the scene of her and Lin Yi having fun together. Her body suddenly felt something, and she unconsciously squirmed a few times. Even her breathing had started to quicken. While Wei Shenjin was shocked, he noticed Situ Qian's lascivious appearance. Without even asking, he could guess what the slut was thinking. He could not help but clench his fists in anger, his joints cracking. This shameless slut that had been ridden by 1,000 men. Situ Guangzong and the others glanced at Wei Shenjin. They thought that he was just too angry after hearing about Lin Yi, his great enemy. This was human nature, so they did not notice anything strange. If not for Dean Nantian and everyone else, we would still be in the dark. This old man can't thank you enough on behalf of the entire Snowsword faction. After listening to Nantian Aurora's narration, Situ Guangzong sincerely expressed his gratitude. Floating astronomy. Chapter 4152. That's good, that's good. I've specially come to deliver this information, this time just to voice my grievances on behalf of your sect. After all, the matter has become so big. No matter what, you should resolve it as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will be detrimental to your sect's reputation, Nantian Aurora said, feigning righteousness. That's right. Now that your sect knows that Lin Yi is Wufu Ling Yi, you should take action as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will be easy for others to laugh at you. That won't be good. See, Haishao chimed in. This, Situ Guangzong, did not directly reply. After exchanging glances with Wei Feng, he said, although that's the case, we still have to treat this matter seriously. We must first find a way to verify it. Otherwise, the will of heaven is not to be trifled with. Nantian Aurora and the others were not the only ones who were afraid of the will of heaven. Their Snowsword School was the same. Not only was the other party terrifyingly powerful, but they also had the high and mighty Vice Island Master of Middle Island. Even if the Snowsword School was large, if they were to recklessly go against such a fiendish god, they would still suffer in the end. Verify it? How does your sect intend to verify it? You can't possibly go to the secular world to verify it, right? Nantian Aurora, Si Haishao, and Patriarch Xianchen all frowned, thinking that the Snowsword School was indeed not so easy to borrow. That won't be necessary. The price to pay is too great. In fact, if we want to verify it, we only need to make a trip to the Tiandan Pavilion and see if we can find Sydney. Situ Guangzong smiled. Then he turned to Wei Shenjin and instructed, Shenjin, pretend to be a customer and go to the Tiandan Pavilion. You don't need to do anything else. You just need to recognize the person and verify it. Yes. Wei Shenjin immediately nodded in response. Grandpa, let me go as well. I can cover for him. Situ Qian quickly volunteered. Her eyes were filled with uncontrollable excitement and joy. Right now, all her thoughts were on Lin Yi. If she could hook up with Lin Yi, then what ugly senior apprentice brother Ma? She would be able to kick him aside. Lin Yi looked like a warrior, rough, but it wasn't bad at all. Situ Guangzong naturally had no objections to this and immediately nodded his head in agreement. Wei Shenjin, on the other hand, was sneering in his heart. He knew exactly what this slut was thinking. A woman could actually be so licentious to this extent. She was truly a unique scorpion shitting on her. However, on the surface, Wei Shinjin was still calm and collected after putting on the bamboo hat to cover his appearance. Thus, he followed Situ Qian to the Tiandan pavilion. As for Situ Guangzong and Wei Feng, they stayed behind to entertain Southern Polar Light and the others while waiting for news. The two of them didn't speak on the way, and they soon arrived at the Tiandan pavilion. As soon as they stepped through the door, they saw Sydney's busy figure. Although her face was covered, her figure and temperament were obvious. The two of them could recognize it at a glance. It really is Sydney. Wei Shinjin was shocked. At first, he really liked Sydney, but he didn't expect that there would be so many twists and turns. Now, things were the same, but people were different. He ended up as a cripple, which made people sigh. Seeing that Wei Shinjin's gaze was fixed on Sydney's busy figure, Situ Qian, who was at the side, smiled. She didn't have any feelings of jealousy. After all, what was so good about being jealous of a cripple? Brother Wei, don't you like Sydney? Then why don't you stay here and take a look at her? I'll go take a look at that Ling Yi and carefully identify him so that we don't wrongly accuse him. Situ Qian said softly. Without waiting for Wei Shinjin's reply, she left him alone and went to look for Lin Yi. Wei Shinjin was so angry that his whole body trembled. If it was in the past, before he was beaten into a cripple, Situ Qian would be jealous if he even looked at another woman. But now, in Situ Qian's eyes, he was just a servant's plaything. He didn't have any status at all. As for their nominal relationship as husband and wife, it would only bring him more pain and humiliation. Looking at Situ Qian's coquettish back view, Wei Shinjin clenched his fists tightly and didn't flare up. When he looked at Sydney again, he was no longer as agitated as before. He was much calmer and more indifferent. Just now, when Southern Aurora and the others were talking about Lin Yi, Patriarch Xianqian had mentioned that Lin Yi and Sydney had already been together since they were in the secular world. In other words, he was the one who had interfered. It was no wonder that Lin Yi would elope with Sydney. Wei Shinjin wasn't an unreasonable person. Now that he thought about it, he realized that all of this was actually because of that *TCH, Situ Qian, who had added fuel to the fire behind the scenes. She had benefited from the situation, which caused him, Lin Yi, and Sydney to become enemies. The source of all his tragedies was this *TCH. Now he had been cuckolded, which was a great humiliation. He couldn't bear it. Wei Shinjin glanced at Sydney from afar, then turned around to look for Situ Qian. He wanted to see what this *TCH was going to do to Lin Yi. As for Sydney, he no longer had any extravagant hopes. Frankly speaking, Wei Shinjin's only wish now was to find an opportunity to kill Situ Qian. He wouldn't hesitate, even if he had to perish together with her. Unfortunately, with his current strength and situation, even this wish would be difficult to achieve without a special opportunity. On the second floor of the Tiandan Pavilion, there weren't any elixirs for sale. However, there were a few private rooms. Other than for Lin Yi and the others, there were also rooms for receiving guests. Wei Shinjin saw that one of the doors was open. As expected, it was Situ Qian's voice coming from inside. Without saying anything, he immediately held his breath and leaned against the wall, silently eavesdropping. "My name is Situ Qian. I wonder if shopkeeper Lin still recognizes me?" Situ Qian said with a flirtatious smile on her face. She looked at Lin Yi's handsome face from head to toe as she drooled in her heart. Compared to Wu Fu's rough look, he was much more attractive. She couldn't tell that he was a fresh piece of meat. "Miss Situ, you must have mistaken me for someone else." Lin erased his eyebrows slightly. He was still thinking about how to get rid of Situ Qian. He didn't expect her to come knocking on his door. It seemed like she already knew his real identity, which surprised him a little. How could that be? I've always been very accurate when it comes to judging people. I would never mistake them for someone else. However, if shopkeeper Lin insists on acting dumb, then there's nothing I can do about it. Situ Qian continued to look at Lin Yi. Lin Yi looked at her coldly. Suddenly, a murderous intent rose in his heart. He had already planned to get rid of this threat, but this woman still dared to come knocking on his door and threaten him. She really didn't know how to write the word death. Since shopkeeper Lin doesn't want to admit it, how about we make a deal? You're a businessman now anyway. After listening to me, I believe you'll agree. Situ Qian didn't sense the danger at all. Instead, she smiled and moved closer to Lin Yi. Floating astronomy. Chapter 4153. A deal? Lin Yi asked calmly. He wanted to hear what this woman wanted to say. Although he could kill her effortlessly with his current strength, he had to first confirm how many people knew about his identity. That's right. Since I'm already here, I'm sure you know that your identity as Wu Fu Ling Yi has been exposed. It's useless to pretend in front of me because I'm not the first person to know about this. The ones who really exposed you are actually the old enemies you've already provoked in the secular world, Southern Aurora, Xianchen, and the others. Do you understand what I mean now? Situ Qian looked at Lin Yi with an even more unscrupulous gaze. In her eyes, since she had already confirmed the secret of Lin Yi's identity, Lin Yi was already a piece of fresh meat in her mouth. He couldn't escape even if he wanted to. What do you mean? Lin Yi's expression remained indifferent, but the killing intent in his heart was like raging waves. He really didn't expect Southern Aurora and the others to join forces with the Snow Sword faction. Now, the problem he had to face was not as simple as a hidden danger. If he didn't handle it well, it was highly likely that this matter would turn into a fatal threat. Even if he had the protection of the will of heaven, his opponents were Southern Aurora and the Snow Sword faction. Their strength was not to be underestimated. In fact, Lin Yi had already decided not to return to the North Island for the time being. If he didn't resolve this crisis properly, he wouldn't feel at ease leaving Tian Chan and Sydney here and going back alone. What I mean is very simple. Although they have some guesses about your identity, they aren't completely sure yet. I'm here to check things out, so you don't have to be afraid. As long as you listen to me, I can help you cover up when I return. That way, no one will know that you're Wu Fu Ling Yi. What do you think? Situ Qian's coquettish body moved closer to Lin Yi. Don't worry, I won't force you to do anything dangerous, and I won't let you suffer. I'll just do something that both men and women love to do. With that, Situ Qian reached out to hook her arms around Lin Yi's neck. At the same time, she fell into Lin Yi's arms. Although it was broad daylight, and there was a lot of noise downstairs, she could not wait to have sex with Lin Yi. It would be more exciting. It was more to her liking. However, Lin Yi pushed her away and looked at her coldly. Miss Situ, you've got the wrong person. I'm not the Wu Fu Ling Yi you're talking about. Huh, you're still quibbling at this point. Lin Yi, you really won't give up until you reach the Yellow River. Situ Qian was furious. She pointed at Lin Yi's nose and said, Fine. Lin Yi, just you wait. When our Snow Sword School captures you, let's see who can save you. Seeing that Lin Yi was still indifferent, Situ Qian paused for a moment. Then she softened her tone and tried to persuade him. Lin Yi, you have to think this through. You'll be mine sooner or later. However, when that time comes, you'll become a toy boy with no status. Don't be so shameless. It's not too late to regret it. If you agree, I'll go back and find a way to kill Wei Shinjin. Then, we'll get married. Wei Shinjin, who was outside the room, was infuriated when he heard these words. If he had the strength, he would rush in and strangle this bitch to death. Unfortunately, he was now a useless person without any strength. He couldn't even die together with her. So, he could only choose to endure. All right, you don't have to say any more. I'm not the Wu Fu Ling you're looking for. So, Miss Situ, please go back. Lin Yi cut her off unceremoniously. Initially, he had wanted to kill Situ Qian, but doing so would alert the enemy. Southern Aurora and the others, as well as the Snow Sword faction, were the true threats. With his strength alone, he would not be able to deal with them. He would have to discuss this with Tian Xing. Good, you've got guts. Let's wait and see. You won't be able to escape from me sooner or later. Situ Qian immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. She turned around and slammed the door. When she saw Wei Shinjin walking down the stairs, she was slightly stunned. However, she didn't even bother to call out to him and left angrily. In response, Lin Yi just shrugged his shoulders indifferently. With the strong protection of the will of heaven, even if Southern Aurora and the Snow Sword School confirmed his identity, there wouldn't be much risk. At the very least, these people wouldn't have the guts to come and capture him. He could deal with them as much as he wanted. However, this woman Situ Qian was unimaginably despicable. She actually used this as a threat to force him to fool around with her. What a weirdo! While he was speechless, someone suddenly came in from the door and knelt down without saying anything, which gave Lin Yi a fright. After taking a closer look at the person's appearance, Lin Yi was even more surprised. It was Wei Shinjin, who had been crippled by him. Lin Yi, I don't blame you for hurting me. I know that it's all because of that vicious bitch Situ Qian. That's why I'm in this state today. Wei Shinjin took the initiative to speak. But you don't have to do this, right? Are you going to acknowledge me as your master or what? Lin Yi asked with a strange expression. He even suspected that this guy was putting on an act, deliberately tricking him into confessing his identity. However, Lin Yi could also see that Situ Qian's words about killing Wei Shinjin were not made up. He really felt a killing intent from Situ Qian. At that time, he had already sensed that Wei Shinjin should be outside the door. There was no reason for him to play along with Situ Qian's act. No, I'm not going to acknowledge you as my master. Wei Shinjin shook his head and took a deep breath. I just want to ask you to do something for me. Help me kill that bitch Situ Qian. Kill Situ Qian. Lin Yi's eyelids twitched. This couple was really a weirdo. They both wanted to kill each other. It was really a case of enemies meeting each other. I know that with your power and strength, you can definitely do it. Now, there is no one who can help me, only you. Wei Shinjin said with a bitter expression. If there was any other choice, he would never kneel to Lin Yi. Even if Situ Qian was playing tricks, it was still Lin Yi who had injured him. This was an indisputable fact. Right now, he was truly at his wit's end. There was really no one else he could ask for help from. No one in the Snow Sword School would offend a powerful elder like Situ Guangzong. For a cripple like him, even his backer, Wei Feng, might not be willing to help him do such a thing. I can kill her, but why? Lin Yi narrowed his eyes. Even if Situ Qian was originally on his list of targets, it was completely different from helping Wei Shinjin kill someone. Not to mention that Lin Yi might not be willing to do this favor. At least for now, he and Wei Shinjin were not on the same side. They were far from colluding to kill someone. Floating astronomy. Chapter 4154. Wei Shinjin choked on his words as he came back to his senses. Yeah, why would Lin Yi help him for no reason at all? The reason why he suddenly knelt before Lin Yi was because he suddenly realized that it was impossible for him to kill Situ Qian. He was a cripple, and it was impossible for him to kill Situ Qian with his own hands. If there was anyone in the world who was willing to kill Situ Qian, it would be Lin Yi, who was standing in front of him. However, Lin Yi was backed by the mighty will of heaven and was the owner of the Tiandan Pavilion. His status was unparalleled. On the other hand, Wei Shenjin was now a cripple. His strength was not even comparable to a slightly stronger ordinary person. Why would he need Lin Yi's help? Moreover, although it was the bitch Situ Qian who instigated the conflict, strictly speaking, they still had a grudge against each other. Even if he transferred all his hatred to Situ Qian, it did not mean that Lin Yi would do the same. Previously, it was Situ Qian who set me up and instigated me to misunderstand you, and Xueli, that's why I was so impulsive and offended you. Wei Shenjin fell to the ground in despair and helplessness. He muttered to himself, "But now, I've seen the true face of this bitch. She's just a whore who has been ridden by thousands of men. She's a vicious woman with a venomous heart." Lin Yi looked at him and didn't say anything to interrupt. To be honest, he thought that Wei Shenjin and Situ Qian were just a couple who were in cahoots with each other. But now it seemed that there was more to it than meets the eye. After I became a cripple, she shamelessly ran around with that ugly Ma Shangfeng. She did not respect me, her real husband, at all. She even wanted to kill me so that I would not be an eyesore to her. Do you think there is a bitch more shameless than her in this world? Wei Shenjin forced a smile and exposed his own dirty linen. He told her everything that had happened to Situ Qian, including the boy toy and the artificial membrane. He did not hide anything. Lin Yi was stunned after hearing this. He already knew that Situ Qian was not a good person. However, after hearing what Wei Shenjin said, he was still shocked. There was actually a woman who was even more despicable than Morongzhen in this world. Situ Qian was really a weirdo. I'm very clear about that traitor's temperament. Since she has her eyes on you, it's impossible for her to let go so easily. When she returns, she'll definitely think of a way to stir up trouble. She's a natural slut, and she'll do anything to get you. Furthermore, I believe that you're a gentleman, and you definitely won't be willing to collude with such a scoundrel. So if you don't kill her, you'll definitely be in trouble, and you won't be able to get rid of it. Wei Shenjin earnestly advised. However, if I were to kill him, the entire Snow Sword School would definitely be enraged. Wouldn't that be even more troublesome? Lin Yi said calmly. You don't have to worry about that. I can cooperate with you and help you get rid of this hidden danger. Seeing that Lin Yi seemed to have loosened up a little, Wei Shenjin was immediately overjoyed. He quickly offered a plan. After I return to the Snow Sword School, I'll insist that you're not Wu Fuling, Yi. That way, even if Situ Qian tells the truth, they'll only be skeptical. Moreover, I believe that bitch will definitely not expose your identity in order to get you. So, you don't have to worry. And then, Lin Yi said calmly, according to what Wei Shenjin had said, it could indeed be a smokescreen. Even if it couldn't completely eliminate the suspicion, it could at least confuse the enemy for a short period of time. Then, you can think of a way to hint to that bitch. Loosen the reins only to grasp them better. Pretend to agree to lure her out. I believe that with your strength, it'll be absolutely easy for you to kill her. At that time, we'll fake the crime scene and I'll take the blame. I'll say that I killed Situ Qian. After all, I'm useless, and I don't want to live like this anymore. Wei Shenjin said emotionally. Hearing this, Lin Yi pondered for a moment. If he did what Wei Shenjin had said, he could indeed kill Situ Qian easily. Moreover, as long as Wei Shenjin was willing to expose his family's dirty linen, he would have enough motive to kill Lin Yi. That way, no one would suspect him. It was a good suggestion, but it wasn't that safe. Why should I believe you? Lin Yi looked at Wei Xinjin and asked in a deep voice. I'm willing to sign a spiritual beast contract with you. You can use a high-grade spiritual pet talisman to control me. As long as I'm willing, even a human can become your spiritual pet. Wei Xinjin said excitedly. You want to become my spiritual pet? Lin Yi was shocked. This was not impossible. After all, a high-grade spiritual pet talisman could indeed control people. However, since ancient times, very few people would do so. After all, who would be willing to be controlled by someone else for their entire life? One should know that the intelligence of humans was far above that of spiritual beasts. The complexity of their yuanshen was also unique. Even if it was a high-grade spiritual pet talisman, even if there was a huge disparity in strength, if the target was not willing to cooperate, it would be impossible to successfully tame it. That's right. I'm willing to become your spiritual pet. Wei Xinjin's eyes lit up. In order to kill Situ Qian, he was ready to risk everything, including his life and dignity. Then wait here for a moment. Let me think about it. Lin Yi did not agree immediately. Instead, he turned around and went back to his room to concoct a heart-devouring poisonous pill. This was something he learned in the common world when he was training with his Shifu. It was taught by his Shifu's wife, Lan Ling. Once this pill was consumed, the person would have to listen to the person who gave it wholeheartedly. Otherwise, the person's heart would be devoured by thousands of bugs. This thing, unless it was an expert in the art of goo, even the best pharmacist, or even a doctor saint like Zhang Liju, might not be able to cure it. After all, everyone had their own specializations, and they weren't in the same system. Conventional thinking and experience wouldn't work at all. As for the high-grade spiritual pet talisman that Wei Xinjin had mentioned, with Lin Yi's current wealth and connections, it was not hard to get it. His control over it was far above the heart-devouring poisonous pill, and he could turn Wei Xinjin into a puppet. However, this thing had its drawbacks. Once something happened to the spiritual pet, the owner would suffer a huge backlash as well. Back then, Meng Tong was spitting out blood because of the black backstick ape. Wei Xinjin had already made it clear that he was prepared to die with Situ Qian. If Lin Yi still took him in as a spiritual pet, wouldn't he be waiting for the backlash? The heart-devouring poisonous pill was the safest choice. This was similar to the poison he gave Dafeng Bro in the common world. He had enough control over it, and he didn't have to worry about any side effects. However, a few days before he left, Lin Yi had already given the antidote to Qin Tian and asked him to bring it to Dafeng Bro, R1152. Chapter 4155. This is called the heart-devouring curse pill. Eat it, and I will believe you. Lin Yi returned to the living room and handed the heart-devouring curse pill to Wei Xinjin. You betrayed me. You will die a horrible death. After receiving the heart-devouring curse pill, Wei Xinjin swallowed it without hesitation. He was already prepared to be Lin Yi's pet. Why would he be afraid of this small pill? Is it okay now? Now you don't have to worry about me betraying you, and you can attack that *TCH Situ Qian, right? Although Wei Xinjin didn't know what he was eating, he was sure that it was something similar to controlling him. So he said impatiently, Well, I'll leave that to you. Lin Yi smiled faintly. What? I'll kill her myself? I'm a useless person now. How can I kill her? Wei Xinjin was stunned. When he reacted, he was furious. He said sadly and helplessly, You tricked me? He'd bet everything on Lin Yi, even his life and dignity, but all he got in return was Lin Yi telling him to kill him. How the hell could he accept that? I never lie. Since I told you to kill her yourself, I will naturally give you the ability. Why would I trick you? Lin Yi smiled faintly and gestured for Wei Shinjin to meditate at the side. Sit down first. I will help you recover your damaged meridians. Ah, recover meridians? Wei Shinjin was shocked. He immediately threw his sadness and helplessness to the back of his mind. He stared at Lin Yi in disbelief. How is this possible? Don't lie to me. My meridians have been shattered by you. Even the 4th grade recover pill and the 5th grade meridian conduit pill have no effect. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a useless person. You should know this. I know. The meridian conduit pill doesn't work, but that doesn't mean I can't heal you. Do you know that the will of heaven's meridians were shattered just like yours? It's even more serious than yours. Aren't you still as lively as before? Lin Yi smiled faintly. You healed the will of heaven. Wei Shinjin paled as he looked at Lin Yi. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. The will of heaven's recovery was a mystery in the whole of Zhongdao. No one knew who did it. Some said it was the mysterious medicine master. Some said it was Zhang Liju's painstaking research. There were all sorts of theories. The will of heaven never came out to clarify anything. The will of heaven himself, the pill hall of the hall, didn't say anything. Wei Shinjin had never imagined that this was actually the work of Lin Yi. If it was someone else who said this, Wei Shinjin would definitely think that this person was talking nonsense and trying to flatter himself. However, it was Lin Yi, so he believed it without hesitation. Otherwise, with the status of a legendary master like the will of heaven, even if Lin Yi was his brother-in-law, how could he try so hard to protect Lin Yi, a new disciple of the 3 pavilions in the North Island? He did not answer Wei Shinjin's question. Lin Yi directly gave him the answer with his actions. In just a short 2 hours, Wei Shinjin was shocked to discover that all the meridians in his body had been shattered. It had miraculously recovered to its original state. This is simply a miracle. Wei Shinjin instantly fell into a state of ecstasy. He was originally a cripple who had lost all hope, and was just a walking corpse with no future. The only reason for him to continue living was to kill that bitch, Situ Qian. However, he did not expect that the surprise would come so suddenly. For a moment, Wei Shinjin was so excited that he could not even speak. He opened his mouth to speak to Lin Yi, but did not know how to express his gratitude. Without saying a word, he knelt down again with a plop and kowtowed to Lin Yi 3 times in a row. You don't have to do this. Hurry up and get up. Lin Yi hurried forward to help him up. Although his meridians were also shattered like the will of heaven, Wei Shinjin's injury was much lighter. Unlike the will of heaven's old injury that had accumulated for many years, it was easy for him to repair, and it did not take much effort. Lin Yi, oh no, Boss Lin Yi, you are my second parent. You deserve these kowtows. Wei Shinjin said firmly, not to mention that Lin Yi had already fed him the heart-devouring vermin. Even without it, he was not an ungrateful person. He was grateful from the bottom of his heart, without any pretense. Lin Yi smiled. He'd seen a lot of people since he'd been in the common world. He could tell whether Wei Shinjin was sincere or not with just one look. Just from this performance alone, Lin Yi could tell that this guy was a man who knew how to repay kindness. Taking someone like this as a follower wasn't a bad deal. Boss Lin Yi, I will go back and kill Situ Qian, the bitch. Wei Shinjin said with a murderous look. He was about to leave with his sword. Although his meridians had just recovered, he was confident that he could quickly regain his strength and kill Situ Qian. Wait, Lin Yi stopped him. If you go back and kill her like this, even if you are a core disciple of the Snow Sword faction, you will not be able to escape punishment. Who cares? Wei Shinjin did not care, and said angrily, "This woman has brought me such great shame. If I don't kill her, how can there be justice in the world? Before, I was not strong enough, so I had no choice but to drag out an ignoble existence. But now, I can't stand it anymore. Even if I die, I will drag this bitch down with me. For such a shameless bitch, you will die with her. Is there any meaning?" Linny looked at him coldly and said, "Don't forget, your life is mine now. I spent so much effort to cure you, not to let you die with this bitch. But what should I do? Boss Lin Yi, I really can't stand it anymore." Wei Shinjin finally calmed down a little, but he was still tempted. He had already realized that he was different from before. Earlier, he was a hopeless cripple. If he could drag Sidu Qian down with him, it would be worth it. But now, he had become a core disciple of the early stage of the Gold Core realm with a bright future. If he wanted to exchange his life with a bitch like Sidu Qian, it would only be stupid. "Wait here for me, for a moment." Lin Yi smiled, turned around, and went out to make 2 kinds of medicine. When he came back, he gave them to Wei Shinjin. "This, you want me to poison that bitch?" Wei Shinjin said in surprise. "Of course not. If it was just a simple poison, Situ Qian's death would be easily traced back to you. What's the difference between that and you directly killing Situ Qian? The 2 medicines I gave you are the right medicine. Even if Situ Qian dies in the end, no one will suspect you." Lin Yi smiled and shook his head. "The right medicine? What do you mean?" Wei Shinjin was still confused. To be continued. Chapter 4156. It's very simple. When you get back, take the initiative to please Situ Qian. Then, both of you will take the first drug. By then, both of you will be very happy. I guarantee that the effect will be even better than the one in the Central Chamber of Commerce. Lin Yi explained. "Ah, do I have to pretend to please that bitch? All right, I'll listen to Boss Lin Yi." When Wei Shinjin thought of Sidu Qian's face, he felt disgusted. It was fine if she did not have the strength, but she had the strength. But since Lin Yi had said so, he could only nod and agree. With Situ Qian's slutty nature, after tasting the sweetness, she will definitely take the drug and secretly find her lover, Ma Shangfeng. When that time comes, just let her take the second drug. Lin Yi continued to teach. "Oh, all right. But what's the difference between the second drug?" Wei Shinjin asked curiously. "Of course, the second drug's effect is even stronger than the first one. But there's also a problem." Lin Yi laughed and said, "If a man takes it, it will cause his kidney water acupuncture point to become stagnant, causing him to lose his young energy and die. But you reminded me that the name Ma Shangfeng is quite a good match. If a woman takes it, she will become dizzy. Her body will act like a natural instinct and will not be able to stop. In the end, her heart will not be able to withstand the extreme excitement, and she will die." Uffed. Good. That's great. Boss Lin Yi is really a god. This kind of drug that kills without leaving a trace is practically made for that bitch couple. It's impossible for them not to fall for it. Wei Shinjin was overjoyed. If he did what Lin Yi said, he wouldn't need to take any risks at all. It was all Situ Qian's fault, and no one from the Snowsword School would suspect Wei Shinjin anymore. They'd only think that the couple was a shameless couple and deserved to die. Wei Shinjin didn't know what to do. When you go back this time, be careful not to reveal your strength. If you are exposed, Sidu Qian might not go to Ma Shangfeng anymore. If that happens, our plan will be ruined," Lin Yi reminded him. "Don't worry, Boss Lin Yi, I understand. That slut is shameless to the extreme. She had an affair with that ugly Ma Shangfeng because she didn't like Ma Shangfeng at all. She was just fooling around to satisfy her cravings. If she finds out that I've recovered, she'll definitely shamelessly stick to me again. You will continue to act innocent in front of me and play me like a fool." Wei Shenjin nodded. "That's right. That's what I'm trying to say. After Sidu Qian's death, I'm afraid that you, as her husband, will still have to be investigated. When that time comes, make sure to clean up the traces. Blame the 2 drugs that I gave you on Situ Qian. Tell her that she secretly bought them from the Central Chamber of Commerce. Tell them about your helplessness and sorrow. The facts are there, and they will definitely believe you." Lin Yi continued to guide him. "All right, in any case, if nothing unexpected happens, that slut Situ Qian should have died together with Ma Shangfeng. With the irrefutable evidence, I believe that no one will say anything." Wei Shenjin agreed. "That's right. That's about the whole plan. Do you have any other questions? Tell me, and I'll help you solve them." Lin Yi asked. "I don't have any questions, but—" Wei Shenjin hesitated for a moment. He said worriedly, "Situ Qian is Situ Guangzong's biological granddaughter. If she dies like this, Situ Guangzong's old face, as an elder of the Snow Sword faction, will be completely lost. He won't be able to raise his head again. Even if he can't say anything at the time, he will definitely find an opportunity to deal with me later. After all, as long as I'm alive, people will think of the Sidu family's immoral granddaughter. That will make him lose face. Situ Guangzong is indeed a threat. However, I can help you solve this problem." Lin Yi smiled and gave him an idea. "After the incident, you can come to our Tiandan pavilion. When you go back, tell everyone that Big Brother, the will of heaven, healed your injuries. That way, you will regain your strength and potential and become a core disciple of the Snow Sword faction. You might even have a relationship with Big Brother, the will of heaven, at that time, who would dare to deal with you." "That's right. That's great. Thank you, Boss Lin Yi, for your guidance. I can't thank you enough for your kindness. In the future, no matter what you want me to do, even if I have to climb a mountain of daggers or swim a sea of flames, Wei Shenjin, will not hesitate." Wei Shenjin said gratefully and excitedly. This person, Lin Yi, not only did he have great strength, he also had a miraculous ability. He also had a profound background, and most importantly, he had a shrewd mind. Every time he came into contact with Lin Yi, Wei Shenjin couldn't help but be secretly shocked. Even if he didn't have the grace of giving him a new life, even if he didn't have the heart-devouring parasite, he had already started to sincerely feel that it was not wrong for him to worship this boss. In the future, if even such a person couldn't reach the highest level, then perhaps no one in this world would have the qualifications to stand at the peak of Heaven Stage Island. I don't need you to do anything for the time being. After you go back, think of a way to cancel your wanted order. Then, put the matter of your recovery on Big Brother, the will of heaven's head. Don't let it have anything to do with me," Lin Yi instructed. The reason why Lin Yi repeatedly emphasized this point was because he had his own concerns. There were many experts on Heaven Stage Island. Once the news that he had restored Wei Shenjin's meridian spread, others would naturally get to the bottom of it. At that time, it would be unavoidable for him to attract the attention of those apex bigwigs and be pushed to the heart of the struggle. On the contrary, if he pushed everything on the will of heaven and said that he had recovered by himself, then even if others had doubts, they wouldn't be able to verify it. After all, they couldn't just go to the will of heaven and ask him directly. Besides, even if they asked, the will of heaven would cooperate with Lin Yi's act, and they wouldn't be able to get the truth out of him. It's not a problem to put the matter on Senior the will of heaven, but Boss Lin Yi, it might not be of any use for me to say that you are Wufu Ling Yi. After all, Southern Aurora, and the others have sworn that you are Wu Fuling E. Even if I go back and deny it, the higher-ups of the Snow Sword faction will only be skeptical and won't directly cancel the wanted order. Wei Shenjin awkwardly scratched his head. Just a moment ago, he had sworn that he would do anything for Lin Yi, but in the blink of an eye, he was stumped by such a small matter. During this period of time, Wei Shenjin increasingly felt that his intelligence was insufficient. That's simple. After you go back, just tell them that they don't dare to confirm my identity. Furthermore, the will of heaven often appears here, so even if they confirm it, they can't make a move. Let them decide. Lin Yi paused for a moment before continuing. As for the matter of canceling the wanted order, wait until you publicly recover. Just say that although you were injured by someone in Tiandan Pavilion, the will of heaven also healed your injuries, so they offset each other. With Big Brother, the will of heaven's face here, I believe that the higher-ups of the Snow Sword faction will be sensible. Chapter 4157. To Lin Yi, it was not a big threat to him whether or not he removed the wanted order. He did it mainly for Sydney's sake. Before returning to the North Island, he had to get rid of all the potential threats. All right, I understand. Boss Lin Yi, you're right. The higher-ups are indeed very afraid of Senior the Will of Heaven. Otherwise, they wouldn't have let us come here first to verify it. Wei Shenjin agreed. All right, then you can go back now. Just do as I said just now, and act according to the plan. Lin Yi said with a nod. All right, Boss Lin Yi, don't worry and wait for my good news. Wei Shenjin bid farewell to Lin Yi with cupped hands, then turned around and left eagerly. He could not wait to kill that be asterisk TCH Sidu Qian. After returning to Snow Sword faction, the first thing Wei Shenjin did was naturally to report to Situ Guangzhong and the others. As he had expected, that be asterisk TCH Sidu Qian was indeed not there. Shenjin, you're back. Tell us, did you see Sydney? Can you confirm that Lin Yi is Wu Fuling Yi? Situ Guangzhong and the others asked hurriedly. Seeing everyone's reaction, Wei Shenjin understood. Situ Qian had other plans for Lin Yi that she had not reported to these people. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief. I didn't see Sydney, but I did see Lin Yi. Judging from his temperament, he is very different from Wu Fuling Yi. I can't be sure that the two are the same person. Moreover, I heard that the will of heaven appears there every few days. Even if I can confirm it, I can't do anything to him in Tiandan Pavilion, Wei Shenjin reported according to Lin Yi's instructions. Can't be sure? How is that possible? Nantian Aurora, Si Haishao, Patriarch Xianchen, and the others immediately exchanged glances. This matter was not fabricated out of thin air to fool the Snow Sword faction. Instead, it was something that was already set in stone. How could they not be certain? This disciple is merely stating the facts and doesn't dare to jump to conclusions. Otherwise, this disciple can't afford to rashly bring unnecessary disaster to the sect. Wei Shenjin shrugged. Since that's the case, I'll have to find a chance to test it out in the future. After all, this matter is of great importance, and I hope that Dean Nantian can understand. No matter what, our sect will always remember everyone's good intentions, Situ Guangzhong said after a moment of silence. He had also thought it through, although Wu Fulin Yi had to be captured, and this concerned the reputation of the entire Snow Sword school. Unless there was solid evidence, he would not act recklessly against Lin Yi and Tiandan Pavilion. After all, it was best not to provoke a troublesome demon like the will of heaven. Otherwise, something big would happen. Even an elder like Situ Guangzhong, who held real power, would not be able to bear such a heavy responsibility. Then, all right, this is your sex matter. After all, we're just reminding you out of goodwill. We're just afraid that if this matter drags on, it will affect your sect's reputation. Since your sect is not anxious, we have nothing else to say, Nantion Aurora said indifferently, somewhat dissatisfied. Dean Nantion, you're exaggerating. The information you provided is a timely rain for us. Our entire sect can't thank you enough. As for that Lin Yi, if he really is Wu-Fu Ling Yi, we will definitely not let him off. Situ Guangzong hurriedly smiled apologetically. It's getting late. This old man has already gotten people to prepare a banquet. Everyone, please stay and have a few drinks. Let us properly perform our duties as hosts. Otherwise, we won't be able to rest easy. Nantion Aurora and the others exchanged glances. Although the Snow Sword School had an attitude, as long as they said a few more words, there was still a possibility that they could deal with Lin Yi. There was no need to make their relationship too stiff. They immediately nodded in agreement. The two elders, Situ Guangzong and Wei Feng, appeared to entertain Nantion Aurora and the others. As for a small fry like Wei Shenjin, he was merely a cripple in everyone's eyes. Naturally, he didn't have the qualifications to sit at the table and was sent home by Situ Guangzong. However, this was exactly what Wei Shenjin wanted. He wasn't like Lin Yi, who was good at hiding his strength. In just a few words, he was already on the verge of being exposed. Fortunately, his meridians had just recovered, and his strength was only showing signs of recovering slightly. In addition, everyone thought that he was a cripple and didn't pay much attention to him. Otherwise, experts like Nantion Aurora and Situ Guangzong would probably be able to see through him. If that happened, the plan that Lin Yi had given him would be ruined. After returning to his room, Wei Shenjin was somewhat surprised to discover that Situ Qian, the hussy, had not gone to look for her senior brother-ma to have some fun. Instead, she was sitting in the room, sulking, while her maid, little Qiuhua, accompanied her and consoled her. Humph, it seems that this slut is really interested in Big Brother Lin Yi. Wei Shenjin sneered. Then he stepped into the room and deliberately squeezed out a smile. He said to Situ Qian, Qian, I just found something good in Tiandan Pavilion. Why don't we try it now? Something good? What is it? Situ Qian frowned and glanced at him. It's something good to liven up the mood. I heard that it's very effective. It's the only one of its kind. Wei Shenjin immediately took out the 2 packets of medicine that Lin Yi had given him. The packaging looked exactly the same. As for which packet was problematic and which was not, only he knew. Something good to liven up the mood. Tiandan Pavilion actually sells this stuff. Quick, let me have a look. Situ Qian, who was originally depressed, immediately became spirited when she heard this. Her eyes lit up as she took the first packet of medicine from Wei Shenjin. Little Qiuhua, who was beside her, also came over excitedly. Sure enough, a pair of shameless bitches. Wei Shenjin secretly sneered. Seeing that the 2 women were immersed in studying the medicine for a while, he took the initiative to suggest, you won't be able to tell just by looking at it. Whether it's good or not, you'll only know after you use it. Then why don't you hurry up? Situ Qian couldn't wait to take off her clothes. Little Qiuhua also followed her to the bed and kept urging Wei Shenjin to hurry up. Wei Shenjin secretly smiled. Then he endured the nausea and walked over. After the 3 of them took the first packet of medicine. As Lin Yi had said before, they were much more satisfied than ever before. Even Situ Qian and little Qiuhua, who were insatiable women, felt a little overwhelmed. They were simply as happy as gods. Afterwards, the 2 women even felt that they had lived for so many years in vain. Even those expensive livening medicines in the Central Chamber of Commerce could not be compared to such a miraculous medicine. In front of such a miraculous medicine, those could only be regarded as a pile of shit at most. Having tasted such sweetness, of course, with Situ Qian and little Chiohua's licentious nature, it was impossible for them to give up. Early the next morning, before Wei Shinjin woke up, Situ Qian pushed Wei Shinjin and asked him to get up and do it again. However, Wei Shinjin said in a daze, "I can't, senior brother is too tired to get up." Chapter 41:58. Useless thing. Situ Qian couldn't hold back her anger. She cursed under her breath and sneaked out with the second packet of medicine with little Chiohua. Naturally, this scene fell into the eyes of Wei Shinjin, who was pretending to be lazy, and his lips curled up in a mocking smile. Boss Lin really was a genius at scheming. Up until now, everything was going according to his script, and there was no deviation at all. Situ Qian, little Chiohua, and Ma Shangfeng, the death of you three is finally coming. Situ Qian and little Chiohua, who had no idea what was going on, found Ma Shangfeng excitedly and began to make love to him. In their opinion, Ma Shangfeng was already very strong in that aspect, and after taking this magical medicine, he would definitely be far better than a cripple like Wei Shinjin. Today was going to be a good day. Sure enough, after taking the second packet of medicine, the three of them immediately felt it. The excitement that made their faces blush and their hearts beat faster was obviously much stronger than last night. Situ Qian and little Chiohua didn't notice anything wrong at all. Instead, they were overjoyed. On the other hand, Ma Shangfeng's reaction at this moment was even worse than the two women. His heart was beating violently, and the blood in his body was burning as if it was about to explode. The last trace of clarity in his mind was instantly drowned, and he instinctively wanted to vent as soon as possible. At the beginning, Ma Shangfeng's strong performance really gave the two women a taste of an unprecedented wonderful feeling. However, just as they were about to climb to the peak, Ma Shangfeng's body suddenly stiffened, and then he suddenly stopped moving and fell straight to the ground. "Senior brother Ma, what are you waiting for? Hurry up!" Situ Qian complained discontentedly. However, when little Chiohua saw Ma Shangfeng's current appearance, her eyes suddenly widened, and she was so scared that she stuttered, Miss Senior brother Ma, he what?" Situ Qian frowned and turned her head. After taking a look, she was also shocked. Ma Shangfeng's entire body curled into a ball like a cooked prawn. His expression was hideous and twitching, and he was foaming at the mouth. It seemed that he was exhaling more than he was inhaling. In just a short moment, Ma Shangfeng had completely stopped moving, and he had become a lifeless corpse. He died just like that. Situ Qian's head was spinning and her mind was completely blank. She never would have thought that something like this would happen during the most enjoyable moment. "Miss, what should we do?" Little Chiohua's face turned ashen. No matter what, Ma Shangfeng was an early-stage gold core realm expert. If he died like this, then the higher-ups of the sect would definitely come to the bottom of this matter. At that time, they would be finished. Situ Qian had Situ Guangzong as her grandfather. At most, she would only lose face and be gossiped about. However, as a little maid with no status, she might become a scapegoat. No, we have to get rid of the evidence. We have to find a way to get rid of the body. Situ Qian gritted her teeth and said, if this matter was spread out, it would be a huge scandal. Even if she did not die, she would not be able to escape punishment. Yes, little Chiohua nodded repeatedly and immediately got out of bed. It would be best for her if she could muddle through this matter quietly. However, before the two of them could put on their clothes, they suddenly felt wave after wave of strong impulses surging through their bodies. That indescribable sense of excitement rushed straight to their scalps, and they simply could not stop. This time, not to mention getting rid of the body, the two of them could not even stand steadily. The surging impulses in their bodies were completely out of control, rushing straight to their brains and scalps. The last bit of reason they had was swallowed up. They were like travelers trapped in the desert, crazily wanting to quench their thirst. However, the thing that could quench their thirst was not water, but men. Under the urge of the tide, the two of them could no longer care about Ma Shangfeng. They immediately rushed out of the room in a disheveled manner. At that moment, there was only one voice left in their minds. "Man, I want a man!" The commotion caused by the two of them attracted the attention of a passing snow sword school disciple. It just so happened that he was a male. When he saw the two of them in a disheveled state, he was immediately startled. However, before he could react, the two of them had already pounced on him like wolves and tigers. Without saying anything, they stripped him naked and tried to force themselves on him. This damned scene really made the male disciple dumbfounded. Of course, he knew what kind of person Sidu Qian was. Not only did she have a noble status, but she also had a good appearance. Coupled with her mannerisms, she was often talked about by the male disciples. However, he did not expect that he would encounter such an encounter today. As a man, he was actually being pushed down by Sidu Qian and little Qiuhua. However, even if he usually fantasized about this, at this moment it had happened so suddenly. Furthermore, Sidu Qian and little Qiuhua looked too abnormal. The first reaction of the male disciple was not to enjoy it, but to escape. However, Sidu Qian and little Qiuhua were currently bathed in fire. It was like a drowning man grasping at the last life-saving straw. How could they let him go so easily? The two of them forcefully pressed him down and poured some of the second packet of medicine that they had not used before into his mouth. In the blink of an eye, the male disciple also became vigorous like a dragon and fierce like a tiger. Instead of running away, he took the initiative to mess with the two of them. However, after a while, the male disciple suddenly foamed at the mouth. His body twitched, and he fell to the ground. He followed in Ma Shangfeng's footsteps and died. This time, Sidu Qian and little Qiuhua did not know what fear was. Seeing that the male disciple could no longer satisfy them, they immediately threw away the corpse and went to find someone else. They randomly grabbed a passing disciple, dragged him over, and fed him medicine. Then, like hungry tigers, they pounced on sheep. In less than an hour, the two of them had used this method to trap 4 male disciples to death. However, the surging desire in their bodies did not lessen at all. Instead, it became even crazier. This time, the matter was completely blown out of proportion. The news of Sidu Qian and little Qiuhua madly grabbing male disciples to have sex with them spread like wildfire. Very soon, the entire Snow Sword School knew about it. This was an unprecedented rare event. Hearing the news, the Snow Sword School's disciples all gathered around to watch. When the higher-ups of the school learned about this, the Snow Sword School's disciples who were gathered around to watch the fun were already packed to the brim. At first, Situ Guangzong did not believe it. It was only when he saw Sidu Qian and little Qiuhua naked on top of a male disciple, moaning shamelessly, did he finally accept the reality, and he almost fainted. Our 1152. Chapter 4159. The upper echelons of the Snow Sword sect, including Wei Feng, were shocked speechless for a long time upon seeing this explosive scene. They exchanged glances with each other. Only one thing was clear in their minds. Were these two women crazy? Situ Qian, what are you doing? Situ Guangzong was so angry that the veins on his forehead bulged as he roared in anger. The prestige he had painstakingly accumulated as an elder for so many years was completely destroyed by this lunatic Situ Qian. In the future, When the other disciples saw him, they would no longer be in awe. Instead, they would point at him and talk about what happened today, talking about the scandal of the Sidhu family. Thinking of this, Sidhu Guangzong even wanted to strangle his own granddaughter to death on the spot. Hearing Sidhu Guangzong's sudden roar, Sidhu Qian and little Qiuhua, who were immersed in an endless sea of desire, finally regained a bit of consciousness. Turning their heads to look at Sidhu Guangzong, who was about to swallow the two of them alive, they were instantly shocked. Then, their hearts uncontrollably contracted. Bang! The two women's exposed chests exploded at the same time, blood splattering everywhere. It was a ghastly sight. In front of everyone's eyes, their hearts exploded, and they died. For a moment, everyone was silent, including Sidhu Guangzong. No one could have imagined that the two women would die so suddenly and directly. Following that, everyone's gazes focused on Sidhu Guangzong. Today's matter could not be said to be small. Starting from Ma Shangfeng, all the way to the sudden deaths of the two girls, a total of 8 people had died. This was an unprecedented event, especially with Sidhu Qian and little Qiuhua's licentious behavior. The impact was extremely bad. This was not only a scandal of the Sidhu family. Once it was spread out, it would tarnish the reputation of the entire Snow Sword sect, and even make them the laughingstock of the entire island. The consequences would be unimaginable. Investigate thoroughly for this old man. Why did this happen? Sidhu Guangzong fiercely ordered through gritted teeth. He was the elder with the highest status here, and Sidhu Qian was his granddaughter. She had the greatest influence on him, and he was also the most eager to know the truth. Although Sidhu Qian made him lose face, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the reason why she became so bold and shameless was obviously because she had taken some medicine. There might be some other reason behind it. Sidhu Guangzong could only hope that this was the case. This was a matter of great importance. They had to find out the truth as soon as possible and quell the rumors. Only then would there be a chance to reduce the impact. The Snow Sword faction's most elite enforcers were immediately dispatched. The first one to be investigated was naturally Sidhu Qian's real husband, Wei Shenjin. Wei Shenjin was already prepared for this. He immediately told them about Sidhu Qian and Ma Shangfeng's adultery. When the news spread, the entire Snow Sword faction was in an uproar. Ma Shangfeng's body lay there. Moreover, Sidhu Qian and little Qiuhua's performance was obvious to all. Therefore, Wei Shenjin's statement was quickly accepted by everyone. Not only did she commit adultery, but she also didn't even let bystanders off. He committed lewd acts in public until he was too excited and finally died. In an instant, Sidhu Qian, who had already been the talk of the town, became the talk of the town. In the public's opinion, she became a slut who could sleep with anyone. She could even be recorded in the history of the heavenly stage island as a typical slut since ancient times. Regarding this, Sidhu Guangzong couldn't refute it. As her grandfather, he more or less knew about Sidhu Qian's temperament. Her adultery with Ma Shangfeng had also been found out. It was impossible for him to distort the truth. However, if the case was closed according to this statement, the impact on the Sidhu family would be too great. They might even be nailed to the pillar of shame for generations to come. Their Sidhu family couldn't afford to bear this infamy. Wei Shenjin, you said that Sidhu Qian and Ma Shangfeng committed adultery. This old man won't comment on this matter for now. However, the reason why she acted so crazily and strangely today was obviously because she overdosed. This was your doing, right? Sidhu Guangzong forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart and coldly rebuked Wei Shenjin. Sidhu Qian was a ruthless person. This was something he couldn't change. The only thing he could do now was to divert everyone's attention to Wei Shenjin's killing. This way, the Sidhu family would at least be less affected. Elder Sidhu, are you saying that I plan to drug her and cause the deaths of Sidhu Qian and Ma Shangfeng? Wei Shenjin asked in front of everyone. You harbored hatred in your heart, so it's reasonable for you to do such a thing. It's not that this old man can't empathize with you. As long as you confess, this old man can consider giving you a lighter punishment. I can even give you some compensation so that you can live the rest of your life in peace. I hope you can think this through before you speak. Situ Guangzong said, half threatening and half tempting. He didn't have any intention of doing anything to Wei Shenjin, nor did he have any intention of avenging Sidhu Qian. The only thing he wanted to do was to minimize the impact of this incident. Elder Sidhu, I will not admit to a groundless accusation. It is, as you said, after I found out that she committed adultery with Ma Shangfeng, I did have the intention of killing her to vent my anger. Unfortunately, I am now a cripple and don't have the strength to do so. I can't even use my Spirit Jade card. So where would I get the Spirit Jades to buy her medicine? Wei Shenjin smiled bitterly. Situ Guangzong was speechless. Wei Shenjin was speaking the truth. Buying medicine required Spirit Jades. A cripple like him couldn't even use a Spirit Jade card, and he couldn't possibly carry a sack of Spirit Jades out of the house. That would be too obvious and would definitely leave an impression on others. Why don't you go to my house and check it out? Just take a look at Sidhu Qian's dressing room. Inside are all the things she bought. I believe it will be an eye-opener for you. Wei Shenjin coldly laughed. He used to be very afraid of Situ Guangzong, an elder with real power. But after interacting with Lin Yi, he suddenly realized that these so-called big shots were only SOSO. Sooner or later, they would be stepped on by him. Hearing this, Situ Guangzong's face became extremely ugly. But when the enforcer returned from Wei Shenjin's house, his face became even uglier. The dressing room is filled with filthy things used to liven things up. There are also quite a few medicines for both men and women. They are all from the Central Chamber of Commerce and are not cheap, the enforcer reported. This time, Situ Guangzong was completely speechless. The Central Chamber of Commerce's items were famous for being expensive. Wei Shenjin was a cripple and couldn't use his Spirit Jade card, so naturally he couldn't afford these medicines. In the end, he could only conclude that Sidhu Qian, that bitch, had reaped what she sowed and killed herself. All right, I understand. You guys do as you see fit. Situ Guangzong coldly glared at Wei Shenjin and angrily stormed off. From his eyes, it could be seen that he didn't know what was good for him. Floating astronomy. Chapter 4160. Seeing the situation, Wei Feng walked over to remind him. Why bother? You were just going through the motions with him. You won't suffer any substantial losses. Why do you have to bear a grudge against him for no reason? You have to be careful in the future. Although Wei Shenjin was one of his people, he was currently a cripple. If Situ Guangzong really wanted to find fault with him, just a casual word from him would be enough to send him to his death. It was impossible for him to go against a powerful elder for the sake of a cripple. At that time, Wei Shenjin could only pray for his own good fortune. Thank you for the reminder, Uncle Feng. However, I'll say it again. Since it's not my fault, why should I take it? Wei Shenjin smiled calmly. If he was really a cripple, he might really drag out an ignoble existence. However, the situation now was different. Then you're on your own. Wei Feng helplessly patted his shoulder, shook his head, and left with a sigh. He then began to ponder whether he should completely give up on Wei Shenjin. However, in just a few short days before he could completely make up his mind, a shocking piece of news suddenly came. Wei Shenjin's meridians had been repaired by someone. However, what was even more shocking was the meaning behind it. Wei Shenjin's meridians had been personally repaired by the Vice Island Master of the Middle Island. The will of heaven. This was quite interesting. At the level of the will of heaven, every action of his had a profound meaning. Even if he did not have it himself, with so many people watching, they would take the initiative to interpret it for him. For a moment, the entire Snow Sword School looked at Wei Shenjin in a completely different way than before. First, his meridians were crippled. Then, he was cuckolded by Situ Qian. Just as he was about to reach the lowest point of his life, he suddenly changed. Not only did he completely recover from his injuries, he even formed a relationship with a top figure like the will of heaven. Wei Shenjin's experience was like a roller coaster, full of ups and downs. Leaving aside the private discussions of the crowd, the reactions of the upper echelon of the Snow Sword faction were surprisingly unanimous. They restored Wei Shenjin's status and treatment as a core disciple. At the same time, they gave up on the arrest of Wu Fulingyi. This decision had been made by the sect master on the spot, and many of the elders had unanimously approved of it. Even Situ Guangzhong, who harbored hatred in his heart, could only maintain his silence, not daring to say anything to stop it. Wei Shenjin was a core disciple. Now that he had recovered from his injuries and regained his identity, it was a matter of course. As for giving up on the arrest of Wu Fulingyi, it was to express goodwill to the Vice Island Master of the Middle Island, the will of heaven. After all, to the entire Snow Sword School, since Wei Shenjin had already recovered, the matter of Wu Fulingyi was no longer important. At most, they would only be gossiped about. However, expressing goodwill to the will of heaven was a huge matter that concerned the entire school. If they continued to hold on to Wu Fulingyi and continued to go against the Tiandan Pavilion and the will of heaven behind it, they would not be able to do anything to Wu Fulingyi. Then they would really be stupid. Shenjin, after going through all those inhuman trials, you have finally seen the light. I am deeply gratified. Wei Feng smiled as he patted Wei Shenjin's shoulder. He immediately passed on the decision of the higher-ups to him. Thank you, Uncle Feng. Trials make one advance. If I hadn't gone through all that, I might still be complacent, arrogant, and complacent. I don't know that there is always someone better out there. Thinking back, this is actually not a bad thing. Wei Shenjin sighed as he shook his head. That's right. As long as you can endure it, all the trials are not bad. Shenjin, you have grown quite a bit. Wei Feng immediately had a whole new level of respect for him. Although his strength was not much different from before, the feeling that Wei Shenjin gave off now was as if he had been reborn. He could not be underestimated. Wei Shenjin smiled. If it weren't for these things, he would not have been forced to become Lin Yi's subordinate. Looking at it from a long-term perspective, being able to form a relationship with a heaven-defying genius like Lin Yi, even if it meant becoming his lackey, was definitely more beneficial than detrimental. It was something that he could not wish for. Elder Situ probably won't dare to do anything to you for the time being. You just need to be careful. Wei Feng reminded him. Then he suddenly lowered his voice and said, Right, the sect master has personally instructed you to go to the Tiandan Pavilion more often in the future. Do you understand the meaning behind this? Uncle Feng, don't worry. I understand. Wei Shenjin smiled in understanding. He had already expected this. The purpose of asking him to go to the Tiandan Pavilion more often was to let him take the opportunity to build a bridge between the Snow Sword faction's higher-ups and the big boss of the Will of Heaven. From the looks of it, the impact of the Will of Heaven's strong return on the power structure of Middle Island had already begun to show its effects. Even the Snow Sword faction had taken the initiative to express their goodwill to the Will of Heaven. In the future, They might even get closer to the will of heaven. Presumably, the other sects would also have their own responses. Maybe this was the sign of a new round of power reshuffling, with the sect master's instructions as a shield. If Wei Shenjin went to the Tiandan Pavilion again, it would be a dignified matter. No one would be able to gossip about it. Rushing to the Tiandan Pavilion, Wei Shenjin reported the decision of the higher-ups to Lin Yi. In the end, he could not help but add a sigh. Everything is under control. Boss Lin Yi is really a godly person. Seeking benefits and avoiding harm is human nature. When you reach the level of a sect leader, face is just a price. In the face of substantial benefits, you can cast it aside at any time, Lin Yi said with a smile. Boss, that's because you have a good foresight. Without your help, my current situation would be unimaginable. It's very likely that I would have been a corpse. I couldn't even kill that bitch Sidu Qian, let alone regain my strength and identity. I will never forget your great kindness. After saying that, Wei Shenjin bowed to Lin Yi 3 times respectfully, expressing his sincere gratitude. You don't have to do that. Since the matter here has been settled, I'm going to leave for the North Island in these 2 days. You should also pay attention to the Tiandan Pavilion in the future. Although there won't be any trouble with Big Brother the Will of Heaven, if it's just some small fries who don't know what to do, we can't let the dignified Deputy Island Master of Zhongdao solve the problem. Besides, Tianchan and Sydney are women, so it's not convenient for them to show up in public. So, we need you to take care of them, Lin Yi ordered. He only had a few friends here. In addition to the Will of Heaven, there were Kai Zhongyang and Ho Guanqi. Both of them were busy people. It was obviously unrealistic to ask them to hang around in the Tiandan Pavilion every day. So, this task could only fall on Wei Shenjin. Boss Lin Yi, don't worry. It just so happens that the sect leader asked me to walk around in the Tiandan Pavilion more often. I promise that I'll come here every day. If anyone dares to make trouble, I'll kill him. Wei Shenjin said with a murderous look. The strength of the early stage of Goldcore realm was not very powerful in Zhongdao, but he had the Snow Sword faction and the Will of Heaven behind him, so he was naturally confident and fearless. Welcome to the Murloc public account, Weishin Yuran 22. The Murloc will publish the latest news on it. Floating astronomy. Chapter 40, 161. Then I'll have to trouble you, said Lin Yi with a smile and a nod. The Snow Sword faction had given up on Wu Fuling Yi's arrest order and turned to the Tiandan Pavilion. This was not a secret. If someone were to investigate, they would be able to find out everything. Most of the people in the know were just there to watch the show and discuss it after a meal. However, when Nantian, Aurora, and the others heard the news, they exploded in anger on the spot. What the hell is this Snow Sword faction doing? We lowered ourselves to provide them with information, but not only did they not deal with Lin Yi, they actually turned around and got along with Lin Yi. They're simply a bunch of despicable people. We've spent so much effort to design this for nothing, said Si Haishao indignantly. That's right, Dean Nantian. They're not taking you seriously at all. The Will of Heaven behind Lin Yi isn't easy to deal with, but do you think we're easy to deal with? How preposterous. Patriarch Xianchen was similarly furious. He did not forget to provoke them with his words. These damned bastards. Nantian Aurora's face was as gloomy as water. The fact that he was killed by the Will of Heaven in one move previously was enough to make him unable to raise his head. He was just deliberately not thinking about it. However, the Snow Sword faction's actions were clearly a slap to his face. If the current Vice Island Master of Middle Island was him instead of the Will of Heaven, even if the Snow Sword faction had the guts, they would not dare to do this. Old friend Nantian, what should we do now? Should we go to the Snow Sword faction and trample on them? Let's see if they still dare to look down on us in the future," suggested Si Haishao. Nantian Aurora was moved. He could not swallow this anger. However, after a slight hesitation, the remaining bit of reason made him dispel this idea. He had the backing of the Cultivator Academy and the Central Chamber of Commerce. Furthermore, he was one of the few early-stage profound ascension experts of Middle Island. He indeed had enough confidence to face a mere snow sword faction. However, he had joined the center with a secret identity. Even if things got out of hand, it would not be good for the center to stand up for him. In fact, he might even be punished instead. "Forget it. I'll become enemies with the entire Snow Sword School. The impact of this matter is too great, and it might even affect the plans of the higher-ups. We can't act rashly. What I'm having a headache over right now isn't this, but Lin E." Nantian Aurora rubbed his temples in distress. When Si Haishao and Patriarch Xianqian heard this, they could not help but fall silent. Lin E might return to the North Island at any time. In the end, they did not even have the chance to borrow the saber's shadow. The previous plan of killing with a borrowed knife was simply a joke. Since the Snow Sword School can't do it, let's go. "Why don't we go to another restaurant?" Patriarch Black Earth suggested. "Which one?" "Lin E has only been in Middle Island for a short period of time. There aren't many people who know his name, and even fewer who have conflicts with him. What's more, he's backed by the will of heaven. Unless there's a life-and-death blood feud, who would provoke him?" Si Haishao said helplessly. "Then what should we do? We can't just let that brat Lin E go like this, right?" Patriarch Black Earth was also helpless, but he still said unwillingly, "Looks like we can only ask for instructions from the higher-ups. If the higher-ups agree, even if we personally kill that brat Lin E, we won't have to worry about the threat of the will of heaven," Nantian Aurora decided. Si Haishao and Patriarch Black Earth looked at each other and nodded in agreement. After all, there was no other good plan they could think of at the moment. The three of them immediately set off for the Central Chamber of Commerce to meet that mysterious black-clothed man and tell him the ins and outs of the matter. They waited for the mysterious man to make a decision, but the mysterious man's words shocked the three of them. "That Lin E, you guys don't touch him for now. I've been paying attention to this person for a long time. And he's also on the list of people I want to rope in," the mysterious man said lightly. Nantian Aurora and the other two looked at each other and were instantly speechless. Although they were extremely unwilling, they didn't dare to have any objections. They could only nod and agree. Feeling helpless, the three of them broke out in a cold sweat in unison. Even if they were beaten to death, they would never have imagined that even their immediate superior, the mysterious man, would actually think so highly of Lin E. Fortunately, they didn't rush to make a move. Otherwise, if they really disregarded everything and killed Lin E, which would ruin the mysterious man's plan, they would really be in big trouble. Nantian Aurora and the other two could only give up on the matter of dealing with Lin E. As for Si Haishao, he could only return to the North Island gloomily. His main mission in coming to Middle Island this time was to rope in Nantian Aurora. As for dealing with Lin E, that was just an idea that came to him after he accidentally discovered it. Now that Nantian Aurora had already joined the center, and the higher-ups didn't allow them to touch Lin E, there was nothing for them to do even if they continued to stay in Middle Island, so they could only return home. Even so, he was still very unwilling in his heart. Back then, he suffered great humiliation in front of Lin E. Not only did he lose all his face, but he was even beaten up so badly that he almost reported to the King of Hell. It could be said that there was a deep hatred between them, but now the higher-ups didn't allow him to touch Lin E. How could he accept that? However, Si Haishao had never been a person who knew his place. Since he had made up his mind to deal with Lin Yi, then no one could stop him. Even if he didn't dare to make a move openly because of the mysterious man's despotic power, if he only wanted to sow discord in the dark, there shouldn't be any risk in letting someone else do it for him. Lin Yi didn't have many enemies in Middle Island, but in North Island, he definitely had a lot of enemies. Even the mysterious man couldn't stop these people from trying to kill him. His hard work paid off. As soon as Si Haishao returned to the North Island, he found a godsend opportunity. The North Island was now full of wanted posters, and the image of Wu Fuling Yi was depicted on them. Wonderful, really wonderful. Just when I was about to doze off, someone came to give me a pillow. This time, it's Lin Yi who's courting death. Then, don't blame me for adding fuel to the fire. Who asked you to be so inhumane and make enemies everywhere? Hee hee. Si Haishao was instantly overjoyed. Wu Fuling Yi had a brand new image, and probably no one in North Island knew that this was Lin Yi's disguise. As long as this news was spread outside without a trace, when Lin Yi came back, even if he didn't die, he would at least lose a layer of skin. Even the mysterious man couldn't blame it on Si Haishao. Si Haishao immediately took the arrest warrant with a big smile and read it carefully. After understanding the cause and effect, he couldn't help but laugh even more happily. In North Island, only Law Enforcement Hall was qualified to issue arrest warrants. And this time, Wu Fuling Yi was wanted for killing Su Zhaohu, a disciple of Rising Sky Pavilion. Si Haishao didn't say anything. After deliberately hiding it from others, he went straight to Law Enforcement Hall. Nowadays, the Central Chamber of Commerce had become famous on all the major islands of Heaven Stage, and its momentum was so great that it was almost as powerful as top chambers of commerce such as Five Elements Commerce and Hong Chamber of Commerce. As the manager of North Island's branch on the surface, Si Haishao was also considered a top figure in North Island. When he came to Law Enforcement Hall, a place with strict hierarchy, naturally, someone came to receive him. Floating Astronomy, you're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.